Hello, sleepy traveller. Tuck yourself in, dim the room, and prepare for a peaceful drift through uneventful history. And if you feel like these videos are of any use to you, then you can like and subscribe, but only if you really feel like it. And now, let's begin. You find yourself standing in the middle of what we now affectionately call Tornado Alley, that unruly stretch of land running roughly from Texas to South Dakota, where Mother Nature likes to show off her most chaotic dance moves. But forget the modern idea of storm chasers in their high-tech vans. You're living in a time long before satellite images and Doppler radar, back when the land was dotted with tribes like the Osage, Sioux, and Comanche, who had front-row seats to the sky's most dramatic performances. Now, let's talk geography. Picture the Great Plains, flat as a pancake and devoid of those pesky mountain ranges that could put a damper on a tornado's party. With warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico mixing it up with cold, dry air from Canada, it's like the ultimate cocktail shaker for storms. This mixology is what makes Tornado Alley the perfect venue for twisters to strut their stuff. The Native American tribes inhabiting these areas were no strangers to the tornado's theatrical flair. Take the Osage, for example. They might have been among the first to look up at the swirling sky and think, well, that's not ideal. But the Osage, like other tribes, didn't just see chaos, they saw meaning. Tornadoes were often interpreted as powerful spirits or omens, a kind of divine punctuation mark in the narrative of their lives. Let's throw some numbers into this swirling mix. Tornadoes can reach speeds of up to 300 miles per hour and can stretch over 2 miles wide, which, if you think about it, is like a skyscraper of wind just barreling towards you. It's no wonder these phenomena were given spiritual significance. For many tribes, these storms weren't just destructive forces, they were entities to be respected or appeased. Kind of like that one friend who always shows up to the party uninvited and leaves a mess, but you keep them on the guest list anyway because they're just too unpredictable to ignore. But don't be fooled into thinking it was all mysticism and mythology. These folks were practical too. They knew when to hightail it out of the path of destruction. Oral traditions, passed down through generations, were the original survival guides. When the sky turns green, it's time to lean into the wind. Might not be a direct quote, but it captures the essence of advice that was probably shared around many a campfire. The data backs this up. Tornadoes occur mostly in the spring and summer, and Native Americans had seasonal patterns of movement that often coincided with these times. Coincidence? I think not. The Comanche, known for their nomadic lifestyles, could pack up and relocate with a speed that would make any modern-day moving company weep with envy. Mobility was their superpower, making it easier to dodge the more aggressive mood swings of the weather. Despite the awe-inspiring power of tornadoes, not all tribes saw them as purely negative forces. Some viewed them as necessary for balance, an inevitable cleansing that, while destructive, was part of maintaining harmony in the natural world. It's a perspective that would make any modern-day environmentalist nod in approval, or at least scratch their chin thoughtfully. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. Tornadoes were terrifying, and the destruction they caused was very real. But the ability of Native Americans to adapt and find meaning in these natural phenomena speaks volumes about their resilience and ingenuity. Unlike today, where we sometimes pretend we're masters of the universe with our technology and infrastructure, until a tornado casually reminds us who's boss, native tribes accepted their place within the broader tapestry of nature. And speaking of tapestry, the stories and legends that grew around tornadoes were as varied as the tribes themselves. Some said tornadoes were the spirits of ancestors. Others believed they were the breath of angry gods. These narratives weren't just idle tales. They provided context and understanding in a world that could be as capricious as, well, the weather. But let's pause and debunk a myth or two. While it might be tempting to think of these interpretations as quaint or primitive compared to modern meteorology, remember that even today we name our storms and talk about them like they're sentient beings. So, are we really that different? The truth is, every culture finds its own way to make sense of the chaos, and the stories we tell ourselves are just as revealing as the data on a weather map. In the end, living in tornado-prone regions was a calculated gamble, but one that Native Americans navigated with a mix of caution, respect, and adaptability. They took the signs from the sky seriously, but they also understood that life, much like the weather, is unpredictable. So as you stand there, watching the sky churn and twist, remember that you're part of a long tradition of humans trying to understand the winds of nature with a healthy dose of humor and humility. And maybe, just maybe, you'll appreciate the artistry in the chaos. And speaking of artistry and chaos, let's get down to the nuts and bolts, or should I say sticks and sod, of how Native Americans turned the unpredictable whims of tornadoes into a manageable part of life. We're talking architectural genius that makes you want to high-five the ancestors. Forget about the myth of the magical tornado-proof wigwam. Spoiler alert, there's no such thing. Instead, let's appreciate the real deal, earth lodges. Earth lodges, my friends, are the architectural equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, versatile, sturdy, and surprisingly sophisticated. Picture this: a circular structure half buried in the earth, with a roof made from a lattice of wooden poles covered with layers of grass, earth, and sometimes even buffalo hides for good measure. By partially sinking these lodges into the ground, tribes like the Mandan and Hidatsa achieved a natural form of insulation and, you guessed it, some protection from those sky-high wind-crazed tantrums. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like something a modern eco-architect might dream up, you're not far off. These structures were marvels of engineering. Earth lodges could comfortably house 12 people, more if you didn't mind getting cozy, and were designed to withstand the harshest of Great Plains weather. The walls, sometimes 2 feet thick, were the ancient equivalent of storm-proof glass. And let's not forget the economics. The materials were locally sourced, renewable, and, best of all, practically tornado-resistant on a budget of $0. Take that, modern construction costs. But why stop at the lodges themselves? Strategic village placement was another ace up their sleeve. Imagine settling in a spot where you could take a breather from the Tornado Expressway. Tribes wisely chose locations that offered a natural barrier against the wind, like river bluffs or wooded areas. These weren't just pretty spots for picnics, but practical choices that offered a measure of safety. It's like picking the best seat in the house at a rock concert, close enough to feel the vibe, far enough to avoid getting crushed in the mosh pit. Speaking of seats, let's sit down and chat about survival strategies. Tornado preparedness wasn't all about hunkering down in a lodge and hoping for the best. It was also about mobility and adaptability. The Plains tribes were as nimble as they were knowledgeable. When the skies darkened and the winds picked up, they could move faster than a modern-day city trying to dodge rush hour. This wasn't just an environmental adaptation, it was a cultural one. Being able to pick up and go wasn't just a survival tactic, it was a way of life. And here's something that might surprise you. For all their spiritual interpretations, Native Americans had a keen sense of observation that would make any scientist proud. They could read the skies like a weatherman reads a teleprompter, knowing when to pack it in and head for safer ground. Oral traditions were rich with wisdom on how to interpret the signs of an incoming storm. You didn't need a degree in meteorology, just an ear for the stories and an eye on the horizon. Now, let's debunk the wigwam myth. While the idea of a wigwam spinning in a tornado like Dorothy's house in The Wizard of Oz is fun, it's not based in reality. Wigwams, primarily used by tribes in the northeastern woodlands, weren't designed to withstand the gale-force winds of the Great Plains. They were portable, sure, but not the fortresses of tornado lore. The real heroes in this story are those earth lodges and the people who understood how to live in harmony with the land's tempestuous temperament. But don't mistake this for some kind of utopian existence. Tornadoes were and are deadly, and no amount of clever engineering or spiritual interpretation could eliminate that risk entirely. What these adaptations represent is a balance, a way to live with nature's tantrums rather than against them. It's a lesson that resonates even today, as modern society grapples with climate change and increasingly unpredictable weather patterns. So, as you ponder these ancient strategies, imagine the resilience it took to thrive in such an environment. It's a testament to human ingenuity and the timeless dance with nature's wild side. The stories we tell about those who came before us, the myths we create and debunk, reveal as much about us as they do about them. And if you're ever caught in a storm, perhaps you'll think of those earth lodges and the clever minds that built them, not just as relics of the past, but as blueprints for a sustainable future. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover about how Native Americans faced the elements head-on with grit, grace, and a touch of humor. You won't want to miss what's coming up next. So, as we dive into the communal alchemy that Native Americans brewed to weather those meteorological maelstroms. Let's shift our gaze from the architectural marvels of earth lodges to the social fabric that held communities together during nature's unruly outbursts. Imagine a landscape where every decision, from the mundane to the monumental, was a collective effort. A place where tribal councils and communal gatherings weren't just quaint traditions but integral to survival. In the whirlwind choreography of tornadoes, tribal councils played the role of conductors, orchestrating decisions with precision and care. Picture this: a gathering of elders, leaders, and community members, huddled together not just to swap stories, but to strategize their next move. These councils were the original crisis management teams, and their meetings were the boardrooms of resilience. It wasn't all solemn speeches and stern faces, though. Humor and storytelling were woven into these gatherings, turning what could be a tense affair into an exercise in unity and understanding. It was like a town hall meeting, but with fewer PowerPoint slides and more buffalo robes. The communal decision-making process was a study in democracy before democracy, with each voice contributing to a collective wisdom that guided the tribe. Decisions weren't made in isolation. They were the product of debate, consensus, and sometimes good-natured ribbing. It was this collaborative spirit that allowed tribes to pivot quickly in the face of imminent danger. The ability to adapt on the fly wasn't just a cultural hallmark, it was a survival skill honed over generations. Let's sprinkle in some numbers for good measure. The Sioux, for instance, had over a dozen different bands, each with its own leaders and councils. This decentralized structure meant that decisions could be made swiftly, with each band acting like an independent unit ready to respond to environmental challenges. It's kind of like having a dozen small, efficient startups rather than one lumbering corporate giant. And it worked. This nimble approach allowed tribes to mobilize resources and manpower with impressive speed, whether they were facing down a tornado or dealing with other threats. But let's not romanticize this into some utopian ideal. The reality was often messy, with disagreements and debates sometimes stretching on longer than a Midwest horizon. Yet, these discussions were crucial, allowing tribes to weigh options and consider the best course of action. It was a system that valued patience and pragmatism, traits that were essential when dealing with the capriciousness of the Great Plains weather. Now, let's talk about oral traditions, the unsung heroes in this epic saga of survival. These were the original Wikipedia entries, passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. Stories of past storms, lessons learned, and strategies for survival were shared around campfires, weaving a tapestry of communal knowledge that was both practical and profound. It was like an epic playlist of history, reminding everyone that while the storms were fierce, they were not insurmountable. This oral wisdom wasn't just about recounting past glories or misfortunes. It was a living, breathing guide that adapted with the times. New experiences were folded into the old narratives, creating a dynamic repository of knowledge that was as flexible as it was enduring. It was a system that recognized the power of the past while keeping an eye firmly on the future, ensuring that each new generation was armed with the tools to face whatever the skies might throw at them. Here's a thought to chew on. While we now rely on weather apps and forecasts to plan our days, these oral traditions served a similar purpose, providing crucial information that could mean the difference between life and death. They were the original storm alerts delivered with a side of storytelling flair. And let's be honest, isn't a tale of a great-grandfather bravely facing down a twister just a tad more inspiring than a notification from your phone? As we explore these community dynamics, it's vital to acknowledge the role of women in this social structure. In many tribes, women were the keepers of knowledge and played a central role in decision-making. Their insights and intuition were valued, offering perspectives that were as invaluable as they were varied. It was a balance of voices that ensured decisions were well-rounded and inclusive, a lesson that some modern boardrooms could take to heart. But let's not get carried away with idealism. These communities faced real challenges, and not every decision led to victory. Tornadoes could flatten villages, destroy food supplies, and upend lives in an instant. Yet, it was the strength of the community that allowed tribes to rebuild, to mourn losses collectively, and to celebrate survival as a shared triumph. It was a resilience born from understanding that while the storm might knock you down, it was the community that helped you stand back up. And speaking of standing back up, Let's debunk a myth that romanticizes Native American life as one of perfect harmony with nature. While their respect for the environment was profound, they weren't immune to its dangers. Tornadoes were a stark reminder of nature's power, and surviving them required both reverence and resourcefulness. It was a dance with nature that required both grace and grit, a balance of fear and fortitude. In the end, the story of how Native Americans faced tornadoes is not just about dodging disaster, but about the strength found in unity. It's a tale of communities that thrived, not by conquering nature, but by learning to live with its wild moods. So next time you see storm clouds gathering on the horizon, remember that you're part of a long tradition of humans finding meaning in the madness, of communities coming together to face the tempest with humor, humility, and a heaping dose of human spirit. Stay tuned as we continue this journey through time and tempest, unraveling more of the ingenious ways Native Americans adapted to the elements and what we can learn from their legacy. There's plenty more to uncover about how they turned the chaos of the skies into a canvas for resilience and innovation. You won't want to miss what's next on this historical ride through the wild winds of time. And as we meander through the economic landscape of Native American life in Tornado Alley, let's pull back the curtain on the resource management wizardry that kept these communities not just surviving, but thriving, even in the wake of Mother Nature's tempests. This is where we see a masterclass in turning adversity into opportunity, a skill that modern-day insurance agents could only dream of. Now, let's get one thing straight. The tribes weren't just sitting around waiting for the next twister to rearrange their furniture. They had strategic plans in place that would make any modern prepper nod in approval. We're talking about a diversified portfolio of food sources that could rival any Wall Street investor's asset allocation. The key was variety, hunting, gathering, fishing, and yes, even agriculture, served as the bedrock of their economic stability. Consider the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, a trio more legendary than any pop group. This agricultural trio was not just a nutritional powerhouse, but also a lesson in ecological symbiosis. Corn provided a stalk for the beans to climb, beans fixed nitrogen in the soil, and squash spread out on the ground, suppressing weeds. Talk about teamwork making the dream work. But it wasn't all about putting seeds in the ground and hoping for the best. The tribes had a sophisticated understanding of crop rotation and soil management that would make a modern agronomist weep tears of admiration. By rotating crops and allowing fields to lie fallow, they kept the soil nutrient-rich and productive. It's like they were playing the long game with Mother Nature, ensuring she didn't get bored and throw a tantrum in the form of a food shortage. Now, let's talk meat. While the modern world has been grappling with debates about sustainable meat production, the tribes had it down to an art. Bison, deer, and fish were hunted with precision, not overexploited. It was a balanced diet that would make any nutritionist clap their hands. And when a tornado came through, scattering game and disrupting hunting grounds, they weren't left twiddling their thumbs. They had trade networks. Trade networks, the ancient equivalent of Amazon Prime, but with more character and significantly less cardboard. These networks stretched across the continent, connecting tribes with goods, news, and yes, sometimes even people. When a tornado tore through and left a community's resources in tatters, they could count on these connections to help restock and rebuild. Shell beads from the coast, copper from the Great Lakes, obsidian from the Rockies, all of these flowed along these trade routes like lifeblood. And let's not forget the economic importance of communal labor. When disaster struck, it was all hands on deck. Villagers came together to rebuild homes, replant fields, and restock supplies. It was the ultimate in community insurance, the kind that doesn't come with premiums or fine print. Everyone had a stake in everyone else's survival, and that created a safety net stronger than any policy Lloyd's of London could draft. Speaking of insurance, let's take a cheeky look at how these ancient strategies stack up against today's modern equivalents. Imagine if Native Americans had access to modern insurance agents. They'd probably be bemused by the idea of paying a monthly fee for insurance that might not even pay out in the event of a twister. Wait, you mean we give you money and you decide if we get it back when the wind wrecks our house? Thanks, but we'd rather rely on our community and trade networks. In truth, the economic resilience of the tribes was a marvel of communal effort and strategic planning. They understood risk diversification long before it became a financial buzzword, and they did it all with resources at hand, driven by necessity rather than profit. This wasn't just about survival. It was about ensuring a future despite the unpredictable whims of the weather. Let's pause to debunk a myth that often floats around like tumbleweed, the notion that Native American societies were entirely egalitarian utopias. While it's true that many tribes practiced forms of communal living and resource sharing, this didn't mean everyone was always singing kumbaya around the fire. There were hierarchies, power struggles, and yes, even economic disparities. The difference was that their systems were designed to be flexible and responsive, not rigid and hierarchical like many of their European counterparts. And here's a juicy tidbit for you, the Mississippians who lived near present-day St. Louis had a chiefdom economy that revolved around maize agriculture. They built enormous earthen mounds, some of which were topped with temples and residences for the elite. It was a society that understood both the power of corn and the political clout of a well-placed mound. Their economy was as much about spiritual symbolism as it was about agricultural prowess. So, as we unravel the intricacies of Native American economic strategies, remember that these were not static societies trapped in an unchanging past. They were vibrant, dynamic, and remarkably adaptable. Their ability to bounce back after a tornado was not just a matter of chance, but of choice. Strategic choices that ensured their communities could withstand whatever Mother Nature hurled their way. In the grand tapestry of human history, the story of how Native Americans managed their resources and rebuilt after tornadoes is a testament to ingenuity and resilience. It's a reminder that while we may live in different times, the challenges of dealing with unpredictable weather and economic uncertainty are universal. And maybe, just maybe, there are lessons to be learned from our ancestors' communal resilience and adaptability. Stay with us as we continue to explore the rich and complex history of Native American life in Tornado Alley. There's still more to uncover, more myths to debunk, and more stories to tell about how these communities forged a path through the chaos with humor, humility, and a whole lot of heart. As our whirlwind tour of Native American tornado survival wraps up, let's take a moment to reflect on the legacy of these ingenious strategies. You might be thinking, sure, they made it work back then, but what does that have to do with us? Well, quite a lot, actually. You see, the echoes of ancient wisdom still reverberate in our modern world, especially when Mother Nature decides to throw a fit. Fast forward to today, and you'll find that many of the practices honed by Native Americans have found their way into contemporary disaster preparedness. Take, for instance, the concept of community-based resilience. This isn't just a buzzword tossed around in city planning meetings. It's a tried-and-true approach that native tribes mastered long before FEMA was a gleam in anyone's eye. They understood the importance of looking out for one another, pooling resources, and maintaining strong social networks to weather the storm, literally. Modern societies, despite our shiny gadgets and flashy tech, can still learn a thing or two from this. When disaster strikes, it's often the communities with the strongest local ties that bounce back quickest. Think about it. During the infamous 2011 Joplin tornado, it was the neighbors who dug each other out of the rubble and shared resources long before outside help arrived. It's a testament to the enduring power of community spirit, a lesson the Sioux, Comanche, or Osage would nod at approvingly. But let's not get too misty-eyed. There's also a grim acknowledgement that no amount of preparation can make you entirely tornado-proof. Just like the earth lodges weren't impervious to a twister's rage, modern buildings, despite their reinforced foundations and storm-resistant windows, aren't either. Case in point, the 1999 Oklahoma tornado, which left behind $1 billion in damages despite all our technological advancements. It's a humbling reminder that nature doesn't play by our rules, and sometimes the best we can do is minimize the damage and pick up the pieces. Now, let's talk about the mobile lifestyle of native tribes. Their ability to pack up and move on a moment's notice wasn't just about avoiding tornadoes, it was a savvy strategy for dealing with any environmental challenge. In today's world, we might call this flexibility or agility, buzzwords every corporate seminar loves to throw around. But for Native Americans, it was a matter of survival. They adapted to the seasons, weather patterns, and even the whims of wandering herds. This adaptability is mirrored today in our own responses to climate change, where flexibility and innovation are crucial for our survival. And then there's the matter of sacred spaces, those places that hold cultural significance and are often chosen for their natural protection against the elements. Native Americans understood that location mattered, not just for practical reasons, but for spiritual ones too. In our modern-day cities, while we might not build near river bluffs for spiritual reasons, we certainly consider floodplains, elevation, and natural barriers when planning urban developments. It's a nod to the ancient belief that the land itself can offer protection if we choose wisely. Let's sprinkle in some numbers here. Did you know that tornadoes affect an average of 1,200 American homes each year, causing over $2 billion in damage? Yet, despite this astronomical cost, our modern disaster plans often lack the communal aspect that was so central to Native American strategies. It's like we've traded real connections for Wi-Fi connections, hoping that a Facebook fundraiser can replace the neighborly care of helping rebuild a house. And speaking of trading, remember those trade networks? In today's globalized world, supply chains have become our modern trade routes, and while they aren't perfect, they remind us of the importance of interconnectedness. But, unlike the fail-safes of yesteryear, our hyperglobal networks can be as fragile as a house of cards, vulnerable to disruption. Just ask anyone who tried to buy toilet paper in 2020. Now, let's debunk a romantic myth that's harder to shake than a cold in January, the idea that Native Americans lived in perfect harmony with nature. While they had profound respect for the environment, they faced the same harsh realities we do. Tornadoes took lives, destroyed crops, and forced relocations. But their respect for nature wasn't about worship. It was about understanding. They knew they couldn't control the weather, but they could control their responses, a mindset that serves as a powerful lesson today as we grapple with climate change. And here comes the sardonic twist. Despite our satellites, storm chasers, and high-tech warning systems, sometimes it feels like we're just as reliant on luck as our ancestors were. Sure, we get alerts on our phones, but when the sky turns that eerie shade of green, all the technology in the world can't stop a tornado from barreling through. It's a sobering reminder that nature's whims are timeless, and our place within it remains as precarious as ever. In the end, the legacy of Native American tornado survival strategies isn't about romanticizing the past, but recognizing the enduring wisdom in their practices. It's about acknowledging that while we may have traded buffalo hides for silicon chips, the fundamental challenges of living with nature's unpredictability remain the same. So next time you're huddled in your basement during a storm warning, spare a thought for those who face the tempest with little more than earth lodges, communal spirit, and a hefty dose of humility. As we wrap up this historical journey, let's leave with a thought as sharp as a prairie wind. We're all part of a long line of humans trying to make sense of the chaos around us, using the tools and knowledge at our disposal. Whether it's the ancient wisdom of earth lodges or the modern marvels of Doppler radar, the goal remains the same: to live, learn, and laugh in the face of life's unpredictable storms. So here's to the past, the present, and the unpredictable future. May we weather it all with humor, resilience, and a touch of ancient wisdom. Your eyes flutter open as the first rays of dawn pierce through the wooden slats of your hall, better described as a glorified barn with a few extra draft holes. Welcome to 7th century Britain, where you, a Saxon warrior, are about to face another day. And yes, the term warrior sounds glamorous, but before you get any ideas of epic battles and heroic tales, remember, even warriors need to do their chores. You roll out of your straw bedding, trying not to disturb the other bodies sprawled around you. Sharing a communal living space is fantastic for forming tight-knit bonds, not so much for personal space. You stretch and groan, but not too loudly. After all, the head of the hall, your lord, sleeps not far from you. First things first, breakfast. The romance of a hearty medieval meal evaporates quicker than morning dew when you realize it's porridge. Again, but don't scoff just yet. Oatmeal is the fuel of warriors, packed with enough calories to keep you upright and swinging a sword. Made with barley or oats, this gruel is more about function than flavor. If you're lucky, there might be a touch of honey or berries mixed in, a rare treat to cut through the monotony. As you chew your way through breakfast, you take in the hall's ambience. Picture a long wooden building with an open fire pit in the center. The smoke has done wonders for the wood's complexion, giving everything a charming layer of soot. Decorations are minimal, tapestries if you're posh, but mostly weapons and shields hang on the walls, a reminder of what you're here to do. The floor is dirt, because who needs carpets when you've got mud? Now, Let's talk about your place in the social pecking order. As a warrior, you're somewhere in the middle. You're not a see-all, the everyday free man, nor are you an earl, one of the higher-ups with land and power. You're in that sweet spot where you get to fight for glory, but still have to muck out the pigsty. It's a delicate balance of prestige and drudgery. The Lord of the Hall calls the shots, and your loyalty to him is paramount. In return, he offers protection, a place to sleep, and, occasionally, the spoils of war. It's an arrangement built on mutual need, much like a medieval version of a terrible roommate situation where you can't just move out. After breakfast, it's time for the morning routine. And by routine, I mean a series of chores that would make modern-day gym enthusiasts weep. You and your fellow warriors divide the labor. Some head out to gather firewood, others tend to the livestock, and a few unlucky souls get to clean the hall. Hygiene isn't exactly a priority in the grand scheme of Saxon life. Laundry day involves dunking clothes in streams and hoping the current doesn't steal your tunic. Bathing? More like an annual event, or whenever you can no longer stand your own aroma. While you're out hauling wood or feeding pigs, you can't help but notice the hierarchy at play. The see-alls, despite being free men, do the bulk of the labor. If they're not working the fields, they're crafting tools or weaving. Your position as a warrior spares you the worst of it, but there's no escaping the daily grind entirely. The lords oversee everything, ensuring the community functions smoothly, or at least as smoothly as possible given the circumstances. As you toil, you think about the bigger picture. The Saxons, your people, didn't just appear out of nowhere. Your ancestors were invited to Britain by the Romans, who needed help keeping out the Picts and Scots. But when the Romans bailed in the 5th century, the Saxons decided to stick around, and here you are. It's a history steeped in migration, conquest, and a bit of opportunistic squatting. You're part of a larger tapestry, a patchwork of tribes and cultures vying for control and survival in a land that's as harsh as it is beautiful. Once the chores are done, it's time to gather for a bit of training. After all, staying sharp is crucial when your job involves swinging a blade at people who really don't want to be swung at. Today's session focuses on shield walls, a classic Saxon tactic. You and your comrades form a line, shields interlocked, practicing advancing as one. It's not just about brute strength, it's about coordination and trust. Each man in that line is depending on the next to hold firm. It's a little like rugby, but with more stabbing. As midday approaches, you take a break. The sun is high, casting its light over the fields beyond your hall. It's a brief moment of peace, a chance to catch your breath and reflect. You share a few laughs, maybe a bit of banter, with your fellow warriors. It's camaraderie forged in the fires of shared hardships and the ever-present threat of battle. You might not have chosen this life, but you're living it to the fullest, or at least trying not to get killed in the process. The afternoon brings different tasks. Perhaps you're sent to the blacksmith to mend your gear. Armor doesn't just come from a catalogue after all. It's handmade, hammered out on a forge by someone with a knack for turning lumps of metal into functional protection. You watch the smith work, his face a mask of concentration, the air filled with the scent of hot iron and sweat. It's an art form, one that ensures your survival on the battlefield. A poorly made helmet or a weak sword could be the difference between life and a very unceremonious death. As the day winds down, you find a moment to yourself. You contemplate the landscape around you, rolling hills and dense forests that seem to stretch on forever. This land, with its unpredictable weather and rugged beauty, is as much a part of you as the blood in your veins. It's a place of legends and myths, tales of dragons and heroes that fire the imagination, even as they keep you grounded in reality. You know the stories. Beowulf and his monstrous adversaries, the kind of epic tales that can distract from the day-to-day drudgery. But let's not romanticize it too much. Life here is tough. It's a fight for survival, not just against rival tribes, but against nature itself. Harvests can fail, disease can spread, and life can be brutally short. You've seen it yourself, friends and family taken too soon. It's a reminder that while the legends are grand, reality is often harsh and unforgiving. As the sun begins to set, you return to the hall. The evening meal is a communal affair, a chance to unwind and share stories of the day. More porridge, but this time with a bit of meat, if the hunt was successful. You gather around the fire, the flickering flames casting shadows on the walls, and listen as the scope, A sort of bard recites tales of heroism and adventure. His voice weaves magic, transporting you to far-off lands and ancient times, even if just for a few moments. And so, as the fire burns low and the hall settles into quiet, you lay back down on your straw mat. Another day in 7th century Britain is done. The life of the Saxon warrior is a tapestry of toil, loyalty, and fleeting moments of joy. You close your eyes, ready to do it all again tomorrow. Because in this world every day is a battle, and every sunrise a victory. As you drift off to sleep, dreams of glory and grog swirling in your head, reality gives you a nudge as the new day beckons. It's time to rejoin the dance of blades and shields, where you're more likely to step on toes than win a trophy. Welcome to Saxon training, where every warrior's fantasy of being the next Beowulf meets the sobering slap of reality. Forget about single combat or duels to the death. Your day starts with the tactical equivalent of a group hug, the shield wall. Ah, the shield wall. Nothing says teamwork. Quite like several dozen men pressed together, holding shields so tightly that you can barely breathe. It's less about personal glory and more about knowing your place in the human barricade. We're talking about a formation so iconic that it makes the Battle of Hastings in 1066 seem like it happened yesterday, but let's be honest, it's not the glamorized spectacle some would have you believe. Picture a rugby scrum with weapons. The idea is to present an impenetrable front, advancing as one while the enemy tries their best to poke holes in your defense. It's all about coordination, and less about the individual heroics you might be dreaming of. No one's getting a solo on the battlefield today. Speaking of weapons, let's dive into the hardware of Saxon warfare. Sure, you might imagine a gleaming sword, but reality is more rusty iron than shiny steel. Your average Saxon warrior wielded a sea axe, a kind of oversized knife that was as versatile as it was lethal. It's not glamorous, but it gets the job done. Then there's the spear, the real workhorse of the Saxon arsenal. Cheap to make, easy to use, and deadly when thrown or thrusted. Think of it as the medieval multi-tool. If you were lucky enough to wield a sword, you were likely swimming in the upper echelons of warrior society, as these were costly to produce and maintain. And let's talk about the economics of warfare. Who's footing the bill for all this gear? Spoiler alert, it's not you, unless you're unusually wealthy for a Saxon. Your lord supplies your armor and weaponry, and that's not out of the goodness of his heart, it's an investment. You see, equipping a warrior is akin to buying a car today, an expensive necessity for those who can afford it. A single sword could cost the equivalent of several cows. Yeah, cows were currency in a way, a moving asset if you will. The lord provides the gear, and in return you pledge your undying loyalty and service. It's a feudal quid pro quo that keeps you both in business. While we're on the subject of business, let's touch on the political landscape. It's as murky as a Saxon swamp, teeming with alliances and betrayals that could make a soap opera look straightforward. You've got different kingdoms like Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria, each vying for dominance. Think of them as the original Game of Thrones factions, minus the dragons. The politics of the time were less about grand visions and more about immediate survival and power grabs. Alliances were as stable as the British weather, and switching sides was practically a national sport. The key players in this tangled web were the kings and earls, each manoeuvring their pieces on the board with varying degrees of cunning and desperation. Now, let's dispel some myths about Saxon combat prowess. The romanticized image of the lone warrior, swinging his sword with poetic grace, is mostly the stuff of epic poems. In reality, battles were chaotic, brutal affairs where the shield wall was your best bet for survival. It wasn't about single combat, but overwhelming the enemy with superior numbers and tactics. The Saxons knew that brute strength would only get you so far. Strategy was the name of the game. The real heroes were the ones who could keep their nerve in the thick of it, not the ones who charged recklessly into the fray. And speaking of nerves, let's not forget the psychological warfare at play. Intimidation was a key tactic. The Saxons would often shout battle cries or sing war songs to unnerve their foes. Imagine trying to keep your cool while a horde of warriors are enthusiastically belting out a death metal anthem. It's enough to make anyone question their career choices. As you practice formations and spar with your fellow warriors, the reality of this life sinks in. It's a constant balance between the romantic allure of heroism and the gritty, often grim reality of survival. You're not just fighting for glory, you're fighting for your home, your family, and a future that's as uncertain as the shifting sands. But that's the life of a Saxon warrior, caught between the legends of old and the harsh truths of everyday life. The day wears on, and as you break for a meal, it's another round of porridge. But hey, maybe you'll get lucky and score some smoked herring if the cooks are feeling generous. As you eat, you listen to the chatter around you, stories of past battles, tales of bravery and loss, and the occasional gossip about who's been seen sneaking off with whom. It's a reminder that even in a world filled with war and uncertainty, the little things, friendships, rivalries, and the occasional scandal, keep life interesting. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows on the training ground, you pack up your gear. The day is done, but the lessons linger. You're a cog in a much larger machine, a single thread in the vast tapestry of Saxon life. Tomorrow, the training will continue, and you'll be back in formation, shield in hand, ready to face whatever challenges come your way. Because in this world, standing still is not an option. The Saxon warrior's life is a relentless march forward, fueled by duty, camaraderie, and a touch of ambition. And who knows? Maybe one day your name will be sung by the scopes, immortalized in the tales of your people. But for now, it's back to the hall, back to the straw mat, and back to the dreams of what might be. As you lay back on your straw mat, drifting into a slumber that's only slightly more comfortable than a pile of rocks, the gears of 7th century Saxon society keep turning. The next morning doesn't promise the thrill of battle or the camaraderie of training. No, today you're stepping into the bizarre theatre of Saxon justice, a spectacle that could make a modern courtroom drama look positively pedestrian. Let's kick things off with the concept of wergild, a term that literally translates to man price. In essence, it's a price tag on human life, a grim but practical solution to the chaos of blood feuds. Picture this. Someone accidentally, or not so accidentally, takes out your cousin in a brawl over who gets to wear the fanciest brooch. In a world without forensic experts or CSI Winchester, how do you prevent a family vendetta that could make Romeo and Juliet look like a picnic? Enter wergild. Wergild rates were as nuanced as a medieval menu, with prices set according to social status. A say-all, your everyday free man, might be valued at around 200 shillings. But if you were an earl, well, we're talking upwards of 1,200 shillings, a small fortune that could buy you a herd of cattle or a decent-sized plot of land. It's a sobering reminder that even in death, social hierarchies were alive and kicking. Now, Saxon laws weren't just about putting a price on your head. They also had a flair for the dramatic when it came to justice. Forget about a jury of your peers. Trials often involved ordeals that would make you question your career path as a professional warrior. Think hot irons and boiling water tools of divine judgment, because who needs due process when you can leave it to the gods? Ordeal by hot iron was a particular favourite. The accused would carry a red hot iron for a few paces. If their wounds healed cleanly after a few days, they were considered innocent. If not, well, tough luck. Then there was ordeal by water, where you'd be dunked in a blessed pond. Floating meant guilty, because clearly only witches and criminals defy the laws of physics by not drowning. These methods might sound like a Monty Python sketch, but they were deadly serious. The Saxons believed these trials invoked divine intervention to root out the guilty, a notion that's as logical as blaming your lost keys on elves. While wergild and ordeals dealt with the big stuff, Saxon law codes also handled everyday disputes with the same quirky flair. Let's say you caught your neighbour pilfering apples from your tree. The solution? Compensation, often in the form of livestock or goods. Steal a cow, pay back with 3, swipe a loaf of bread, expect to cough up a bushel of grain. It's like the world's most unsatisfying game of Monopoly, where the stakes are your livelihood. Here's the kicker. These laws weren't just arbitrary rules scribbled down by some bored monk. They were codified by the kings, like King Inny of Wessex, whose law code from around 694 AD is one of the earliest we have. Ian's laws covered everything from theft to murder, and even included regulations about who could marry whom. It's a legal tapestry woven with threads of practicality, tradition, and a touch of whimsy. But let's not pretend this system was all-knowing or fair. Justice in Saxon Britain was as much about power and influence as it was about right and wrong. Nobles had the upper hand, often escaping harsh punishments that would see a commoner swinging from a gallows. Wealth and connections could tip the scales of justice faster than you could say corruption. As you mull over these quirks of Saxon justice, it becomes clear that this system was rooted in the realities of the time. In a world where the nearest police force was as far away as the moon and every village was its own little kingdom, these laws were more about maintaining order than delivering true justice. They were a pragmatic solution to the chaos of early medieval life, a way to keep the peace without descending into endless cycles of revenge. Reflecting on this, you realize that the Saxon sense of justice, while seemingly absurd, was a reflection of their world, a world where survival was a daily struggle and where the line between life and death was as thin as a blade. It's a reminder that while our modern legal systems may have their flaws, they at least lack the trial by boiling water approach. As the day winds down and you return to the hall, there's a fresh topic of conversation around the fire. A recent dispute settled by Wergild, perhaps, or a tale of a particularly harrowing ordeal. It's a reminder of the ever-present balance between order and chaos, a dance as intricate as any shield wall maneuver. You listen, intrigued, as the stories weave together the fabric of Saxon life, a tapestry of fairness and folly, of humanity at its most raw and real. And with that, you're back on your straw mat, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Perhaps another round of training, a new tale from the scope, or more porridge than any warrior ever wanted. But one thing's for sure. In this world of constant change and challenge, the stories of justice and survival will continue to unfold, each day offering new chapters in the saga of Saxon life. As the flickering firelight casts playful shadows on the hall's walls, the air buzzes with anticipation. Evening is prime time for the Saxon social scene, which means only one thing. It's Mead Hall o'clock. Forget your modern bar crawl. This is where the real action happens, fueled by barrels of ale and more gossip than a reality TV reunion special. But let's set the scene properly. The Mead Hall isn't just a place to knock back a pint or two, though there's plenty of that. It's the pulsating heart of Saxon community life, the combination of your local pub, town hall, and open mic night. Built sturdily from wood, it's a long building with a thatched roof that defies the best efforts of the British weather. Inside, the central fire pit warms the room and fills it with enough smoke to make your eyes water more than a breakup playlist, while wooden benches and tables groan under the weight of food and flagons. Now, let's talk beverages. Mead is the drink of choice, a potent brew made from fermented honey that's sweet enough to remind you of simpler times, like 5 minutes before you started seeing double. Ale is a close second, brewed from barley and served in quantities that would make a modern-day craft beer enthusiast weep with joy. It's less about savouring the complex notes of hops and more about washing down the day's grime with something that won't poison you. Consider it the Saxon equivalent of a health drink, minus the kale. But the Mead Hall isn't just about imbibing copious amounts of liquid courage. It's a stage for the scope, the bard who keeps the oral traditions alive, with tales of heroism, tragedy, and the occasional scandalous aside. Here, history is less about dusty tomes and more about dramatic retellings, complete with embellishments that would make a tabloid journalist blush. This oral tradition is crucial because, let's face it, literacy rates are hovering somewhere around how do you spell axe. The stories told here become the historical record, or at least the version everyone agrees to after a few rounds. The Saxons have a particular fondness for riddles, a pastime that combines linguistic skill with a touch of mischief. These aren't the kind you'd find in a children's puzzle book. They're more like cryptic brain teasers designed to stump even the sharpest minds. Take, for example, the famous Exeter book, a 10th century collection of riddles that still baffles scholars today. These word puzzles are the medieval equivalent of a stand-up comedy routine where wit and wordplay reign supreme. Solving them isn't just a pastime, it's a way to show off your smarts without having to lift a sword. And let's not forget the role of the Mead Hall as a gossip hub. Here, news travels faster than a Saxon warrior at the sight of an open gate. Whether it's the latest political manoeuvrings or who's been eyeing the Lord's daughter, the Mead Hall is where you catch up on all the juicy tidbits. It's the medieval Twitter feed, one where the retweets are literal whispers passed from ear to ear. This is where alliances are forged, feuds are kindled, and reputations are made or broken faster than you can say Wergild. Economically speaking, the Mead Hall is a microcosm of the Saxon world. The Lord provides the food and drink, a demonstration of his wealth and generosity. It's a feast that showcases the spoils of war and the bounty of the harvest, a tangible reminder of the community's prosperity, or lack thereof. But don't be fooled by the jovial atmosphere. There's a hierarchy at play. The seating arrangement isn't just about who gets the best view of the scope. It's a reflection of status, with the Lord and his most trusted warriors occupying the prime spots, while the Seals hover around the edges, hoping for scraps of food and information. Now, let's debunk a few myths. The mead hall isn't all jolly camaraderie and boisterous laughter. Beneath the surface, there's a simmering tension as palpable as the ale is potent. Disputes can flare up like a poorly managed bonfire, and the Lord's ability to maintain peace is as critical as his prowess on the battlefield. This is a place where words can cut sharper than any sword, and diplomacy is as much a weapon as the sea axe at your side. As the night wears on, the tales grow taller and the riddles more challenging. The fire burns low, casting a warm glow that makes the hall feel both intimate and expansive. It's a space where the line between myth and reality blurs, where the past is as alive as the present. And as the scope's voice rises and falls, weaving stories that will be retold for generations, you realize that this is more than just entertainment. It's the lifeblood of Saxon culture, a living history that binds the community together in a shared narrative. The mead hall is where you find yourself reflected in the stories of heroes and legends, where the mundane and the extraordinary collide in a tapestry as rich and complex as the society it represents. It's a reminder that while the Saxons might not have left behind grand monuments or libraries, their legacy endures in the tales and traditions passed down through the ages. As the last of the ale is drained and the fire dwindles to embers, you prepare to leave the mead hall behind. The stories and riddles linger in your mind, a comforting echo as you step out into the cool night air. You know that tomorrow will bring new challenges and adventures, but for now, you carry with you the warmth of shared stories and the promise of more to come. And so, with the night sky stretching above like a vast, star-studded tapestry, you make your way back to your straw mat. The mead hall may stand silent now, but its spirit lives on in the whispered stories and riddles that continue to shape the world around you. In this place of myth and reality, you find not just a sense of belonging, but a connection to the endless saga of human experience, a tale as old as time and just as compelling. And as you walk away from the mead hall, the echoes of laughter and song fading into the crisp night air, the promise of a feast lures you back to the heart of 7th century Saxon life. When it comes to Saxon gatherings, nothing quite tops the allure of a full-blown feast. It's the medieval equivalent of throwing a party that everyone talks about for weeks. Minus the Instagram stories, and plus the very real chance of a sword fight over the last piece of roasted boar. Now, when I say feast, I mean a banquet that would make even a modern all-you-can-eat buffet feel inadequate. The centerpiece? A roast boar, naturally, because what better way to assert dominance over the animal kingdom than by devouring its most fearsome member? And let's not forget the bread-dense dark loaves that double as weapons if the conversation gets too heated. These feasts are more than just a chance to gorge on food. They're a stage for forging alliances, settling disputes, and maybe even a bit of matchmaking. Remember, Saxon politics are as much about who you know as who you can trust, not to stab you in the back, literally. As you take your place among the benches, the scene around you is a study in organized chaos. The Lord's seat is the epicenter of activity, a position of honor that symbolizes his power and influence. His most trusted warriors and advisors sit nearby, their positions reflecting their status. The further you sit from the head table, the less influence you wield, a subtle yet undeniable reminder of where you stand in the social hierarchy. But let's not get too caught up in the glamour of it all. Beneath the layers of roasted meats and overflowing cups lies the grit of Saxon life. For every sumptuous feast, there are countless meals of porridge or dried fish, reminders of the harsh realities of early medieval existence. The food is a testament to the community's prosperity, or lack thereof, dictated by the ever-fickle British weather and the success of recent skirmishes or raids. And as the evening progresses, the feasting hall becomes a microcosm of Saxon society. It's less about the food and more about the social dynamics at play. Deals are struck with a nod and a refill of ale, while rivalries simmer just below the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. The feast is a dance of subtlety and strategy, a game where the stakes are as high as the goblets are deep. As you watch alliances form and dissolve over roasted meats and mead, the romanticized image of Saxon life begins to fade. Yes, there's a certain allure to the idea of warriors feasting in a great hall, but the truth is more complex. For every tale of heroism, there's a story of hardship. For every feast, there's a famine. The legends may inspire, but they often gloss over the grueling reality of a world where survival is never guaranteed. And then there's the matter of disputes. In this hall, they're often settled with the clink of a cup or the exchange of goods rather than the clash of swords. It's a practical approach, born out of necessity rather than nobility. After all, a community that tears itself apart over every slight wouldn't last long in a world as unforgiving as this one. Instead, the Saxons have mastered the art of compromise, understanding that sometimes the best solution is the one that keeps the peace, even if it means swallowing a bit of pride. As the evening draws to a close, the fire casting flickering shadows that dance across the hall's walls, you're left with a clearer picture of this tumultuous era. The Saxons, like all of us, are a blend of contradictions, warriors and farmers, dreamers and pragmatists, living in a world where myth and reality intertwine. They're as bound by their struggles as they are by their stories, each day a testament to their resilience and adaptability. In wrapping up our day in the life journey, let's not kid ourselves about the glamorous image of the Saxon warrior. Sure, there are moments of glory, the thrill of battle, the camaraderie of shared hardship. But for every epic saga, there's a mundane routine, a reminder that even legends must deal with the realities of daily life. The appeal of the Saxon world lies in its complexity, its ability to inspire tales of valor while grounding them in the dirt and sweat of survival. So as you settle down for the night, ready to embrace whatever stories the scope might weave next, remember that the Saxons' legacy is more than just their swords and shield walls. It's their ability to navigate a world of uncertainty with courage and cunning, their knack for turning everyday struggles into stories that endure through the ages. And with that, you drift into sleep, the tales of Saxon life spinning through your dreams, stories of a people who lived on the edge of legend, where the lines between myth and reality blurred under the flickering glow of a mead hall fire. Tomorrow, the dance of history will continue, and you'll be there, ready to take your place in the ongoing saga of this remarkable era. In the whirlwind of 17th-century France, where ambition was as much a currency as gold, a certain Armand Jean Duplessis, better known as Cardinal Richelieu, began his ascent with the determination of a cat staking out the best spot in a sunbeam. Born in 1585, Richelieu was the fifth child in a family of minor nobility, the kind of pedigree that gave you just enough social clout to be invited to dinner, but not enough to avoid dish duty. His father died when Armand was only 5, leaving the family with a pile of debts that made the Tower of Pisa look straight. Richelieu's mother, Suzanne de la Porte, was no pushover. She engineered marriages and career paths for her children with the precision of a chess grandmaster. Young Armand, originally intended for a military career, was quickly rerouted after the family snagged the bishopric of Luçon, a post they could ill afford to lose. At the age of 21, Armand hustled his way to Rome to get a papal dispensation to become a bishop before the canonical age of 27. Talk about fast-tracking your career. The bureaucracy might have been slower than molasses, but Richelieu had the tenacity of a caffeinated squirrel. By 1608, Richelieu had secured his bishopric, and his education, a blend of theology and political manoeuvring, served him well. His knack for diplomacy was evident even then. While most were content with sermons about sin and salvation, Richelieu used his position to mend fences with the Huguenots, those pesky Protestants who made Catholic France feel like a kid who couldn't bring peanut butter to school. He knew that keeping them in check wasn't just about religious superiority, but also about maintaining political stability. His first real taste of power wasn't just a sip, it was a gulp. Fast forward a few years, and Richelieu's ambition had him rubbing elbows with Louis XIII's mother, Marie de Medici. Now, Marie wasn't just any queen mother. She was the kind who thought ruling was a family business, and boy, did she love to micromanage. Richelieu became her trusted advisor, which was like being the only adult in a room full of toddlers with sharp objects. Marie needed someone who could navigate the turbulent waters of court politics, and Richelieu was the kind of guy who didn't just swim, he backstroked with style. The court of Louis XIII was a hotbed of intrigue, a place where allegiances shifted like sand dunes in a desert storm. Yet Richelieu, with his uncanny ability to read people like a book, maneuvered through it like a seasoned chess player. He understood that power wasn't just about titles or land, it was about influence, and he wielded it with the finesse of a surgeon. His rise was not without its hurdles. Rivals abounded, and they would have loved nothing more than to see him flounder. But Richelieu's charm was more potent than a tankard of the finest French wine, and he used it to win over skeptics and adversaries alike. The young Cardinal's political acumen was complemented by his mastery of the art of persuasion. He spoke with the kind of eloquence that could make a tax collector sound like a poet. In a world where words were often more lethal than swords, Richelieu wielded his like a maestro conducting an orchestra. His education, steeped in the classics and refined by practical experience, became the foundation of his strategy. He was the puppet master, pulling the strings with an invisible hand, ensuring that his influence reached every corner of Louis XIII's court. While his rise might seem like the stuff of legend, Richelieu's ascent was far from a fairy tale. The corridors of power were lined with pitfalls, each more treacherous than the last. Yet, time and again, Richelieu proved his mettle, not just through cunning, but through an understanding of the human condition that was rare for his time. He knew that behind every political maneuver was a person with desires, fears, and ambitions. By playing to these, he could turn adversaries into allies and rivals into footnotes in his story. Richelieu's early life and political maneuvering provide a fascinating glimpse into how one man's vision and ambition could reshape the destiny of a nation. He wasn't just a man of the cloth. He was a man of action, a visionary who saw the potential for greatness in a France that was, at the time, a patchwork of competing interests and factions. His journey from minor nobility to one of the most powerful figures in French history is a testament to his indomitable spirit and strategic brilliance. With every step, Richelieu laid the groundwork for a legacy that would endure long after the intrigues of his time had faded into history. Richelieu, having clawed his way up from the obscurity of minor nobility to the ear of the king, was now poised to tackle one of the greatest puzzles of his time, the fractured mess that was France. Picture a country as divided as a pie hoarded by bickering siblings, each faction determined to get their piece. The nobility, the Huguenots, and a host of other interest groups all jostled for influence, and Richelieu's challenge was to balance these competing interests without letting France descend into chaos again. Let's break down Richelieu's strategy, which was less about brute force and more about the delicate art of political ballet. First on his list was the nobility, those perennial thorns in the side of centralized power. With titles and lands often came an ego that could barely fit through the chateau doors. These nobles were like cats, each convinced they were the king of the jungle, or at least the French countryside. Richelieu's approach was to keep them busy. He understood that idle hands are the devil's playground. He curtailed their power by drawing them into the machinery of government, making them feel important without actually letting them hold the reins. Think of it as giving a toddler a steering wheel and a playpen while the adults do the actual driving. Then there were the Huguenots, the Protestant minority in a staunchly Catholic country. Their existence was a constant reminder that religious unity in France was more of a suggestion than a reality. The Edict of Nantes in 1598 had given them a degree of religious freedom, but by Richelieu's time that freedom was more like a leash, stretched and frayed. Richelieu might have worn the Cardinal's robes, but he was no religious zealot. He saw the Huguenots not as heretics, but as potential disruptors of the peace, and he was all about maintaining order. His solution? Strip them of their military strongholds while allowing them to keep their religion. He was like the parent who confiscates the toy sword but lets the kid keep the action figures. The Huguenots could worship as they pleased, but any visions of armed rebellion were promptly snuffed out. Richelieu excelled in the art of the alliance, understanding that a well-placed friend could be worth a dozen treaties. He aligned France with Protestant powers abroad, a move that raised eyebrows in Catholic Europe but made strategic sense. It was a classic instance of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and it paid off. France needed allies in its conflict with the Habsburgs, whose empire was so sprawling it made the Roman Empire look like a local franchise. By siding with Protestant states, Richelieu ensured that France wasn't left out in the cold when the Habsburgs came knocking. Within the royal court, he maintained his grip on power by keeping Louis XIII's favour. The king, who was more comfortable with hunting dogs than with the intricacies of governance, relied heavily on Richelieu's guidance. It was a symbiotic relationship. Richelieu needed the king's backing to implement his policies, and the king needed Richelieu to keep the realm from imploding. The Cardinal was like a seasoned chef, constantly adjusting the heat to prevent the pot from boiling over. Richelieu didn't just rely on his charm and political acumen, though both were considerable. He was a master of espionage, heading a network of spies who kept him informed of every whisper and plot. In the Game of Thrones, knowledge was power, and Richelieu had more intel than a modern-day intelligence agency. His spies were everywhere, from the taverns of Paris to the palaces of Europe, ensuring that any conspiracy against him was swiftly quashed. And how about those myths that portray Richelieu as a Machiavellian villain, all black cloak and sinister laugh? Well, he certainly wasn't above using ruthless tactics, but he was far from the one-dimensional bad guy of Dumas' novels. His actions were driven by a vision for a strong, centralized France, not personal gain. He understood that to unify a country, sometimes you had to play the villain, at least in the eyes of your enemies. Economically, Richelieu's policies helped stabilize France after the chaos of the previous decades. His reforms in trade and industry laid the groundwork for future prosperity. He promoted the development of a navy, knowing that control of the seas was essential for a nation aspiring to greatness. He taxed, he borrowed, and he spent with the precision of a banker who never forgot a debt. It wasn't always popular, but it was effective. All the while, he managed to keep his head literally. In an era where political missteps often resulted in a swift trip to the guillotine, or worse, Richelieu's ability to outmaneuver his rivals was nothing short of miraculous. He was a political tightrope walker, balancing the interests of the court, the nobility, and the church, with an acumen that was as rare as it was impressive. In the great tapestry of history, Richelieu was not just a thread, but a weaver, crafting a narrative of power and politics that would influence France for generations. He was a man who understood that in the game of politics, the only constant was change, and he adapted with a nimbleness that kept him one step ahead of those who would see him fall. Richelieu's life was a testament to the power of vision and strategy in shaping the destiny of nations. His ability to juggle alliances and enemies with equal dexterity ensured that France emerged from a period of internal strife stronger than before. It was a balancing act worthy of an acrobat, and Richelieu performed it with the grace and precision of a maestro. Stay tuned, because the story of Richelieu's legacy and its impact on the future of France is far from over. As Richelieu tightened his grip on the French political scene, he turned his gaze outward toward the simmering cauldron of chaos that was the 30 Years' War, a conflict so sprawling it could have been pulled from the fevered imagination of a fantasy novelist. Picture Europe in the early 17th century, a patchwork of territories, each with its own agenda, and a religious divide that made the Hatfields and McCoys look like a knitting circle. This was Richelieu's playground, and he was about to turn it into a chessboard. Richelieu's involvement in the 30 Years' War wasn't just about picking sides. It was about weaving a tapestry of alliances that would safeguard France's interests while simultaneously hobbling the Habsburgs. The Habsburgs, for those keeping score at home, were the family that controlled the Holy Roman Empire and Spain, wielding power like an overzealous monopoly player, snapping up Boardwalk and Park Place. Their influence was a thorn in France's side, and Richelieu was just the man to pluck it out. Here's where Richelieu's diplomatic acumen shone. While France was a Catholic nation, he allied with Protestant states like Sweden and the Dutch Republic. This wasn't a crisis of faith, but a strategic masterstroke. By backing these Protestant powers against the Habsburgs, Richelieu aimed to create a buffer zone around France, a sort of geopolitical moat filled with Protestant piranhas. It was a move straight out of the Playbook of pragmatism. The enemy of my enemy is my slightly awkward dinner guest. But let's not gloss over the reality. This was a war that saw some of the most brutal fighting in European history. It was like a medieval version of trench warfare, with mercenaries pillaging the countryside and civilians caught in the crossfire. The war devastated regions, with estimates suggesting that parts of Germany lost up to 60% of their population. Economically, the landscape was scorched. Socially, it was fractured beyond repair. Richelieu, from his Parisian perch, was less concerned with the humanitarian cost and more with the strategic advantage. His cold calculus might seem ruthless, but it's hard to deny its effectiveness. Richelieu's approach to diplomacy was as much about what was unsaid as what was spoken aloud. He engaged in backdoor deals and secret treaties, the kind of cloak-and-dagger diplomacy that would make a Cold War spy blush. One of his standout performances was the Treaty of Beowulf in 1631, where he bankrolled the Swedish army to the tune of 400,000 livres per year. Think of it as a military Kickstarter campaign, with Richelieu as the savvy investor who didn't even need to leave his cardinal's chair. Yet even the best-laid plans can go awry. Richelieu's diplomacy was not immune to blunders. Take, for instance, the time he backed King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden with high hopes, only to have Gustavus die in battle shortly after. It was a setback akin to betting on a horse that decides halfway through the race that it would rather take a nap. Richelieu had to scramble, ensuring that Sweden remained in the fight against the Habsburgs. It was a testament to his adaptability and the depth of his diplomatic toolkit. Now, let's talk economics. Wars don't pay for themselves, and Richelieu had to ensure France's coffers were robust enough to play in the big leagues. He reformed the French tax system, which was about as popular as a root canal but equally necessary. By increasing taxes on the nobility and expanding the government's reach into trade, he shored up the state's finances. It was the fiscal equivalent of rummaging through the couch cushions for spare change, only to find a small fortune. Richelieu's economic policies weren't just about funding wars, they were about positioning France as a dominant European power. He understood that commerce was the lifeblood of any great nation, and his efforts to support colonial expansion and maritime trade laid the groundwork for France's later imperial ambitions. He was building a legacy, one livre at a time. But wait, there's more. Richelieu's diplomatic web extended beyond Europe. He also eyed the New World, recognizing that colonial expansion was a game-changer. By supporting French colonies in the Americas, he set the stage for France's eventual showdown with Britain in the centuries to come. It was a long-term play, the kind that requires not just vision but also patience, a commodity in short supply among his contemporaries. In the midst of all this, Richelieu had to keep the French court under control. Louis XIII was no Henry VIII. He preferred hunting to ruling, leaving Richelieu to handle the delicate art of balancing court factions. The Cardinal's spy network was crucial here, keeping him informed of every plot, whisper, and conspiracy. It was like having a hotline to the grapevine, allowing Richelieu to nip trouble in the bud before it blossomed into a full-blown coup. And then there's the myth-busting. Richelieu is often portrayed as a puppet master, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. While true to an extent, it's an oversimplification. He was a man operating in a world of uncertainties, where alliances could shift with the wind and a single misstep could lead to disaster. Richelieu wasn't infallible. He was a master strategist, yes, but also a man acutely aware of the precariousness of his position. He walked a tightrope between power and downfall, a balancing act that required both nerve and finesse. In the grand tapestry of history, Richelieu's actions in the 30 Years' War were a turning point. He helped transform France from a country on the sidelines into a central player in European politics. His legacy was one of strength and strategy, a testament to his vision and determination. Yet for all his successes, Richelieu's story is one of complexity, a man who played the game of diplomacy with unmatched skill, yet left a trail of devastation in his wake. As we delve further into his legacy, the question remains, what price was paid for France's ascent and who bore the cost? Stay tuned, because the tale of Richelieu's impact is far from over. As Richelieu's foreign policies were playing out like a grand chess match on the European stage, back in France he had a different game in mind, one that involved reshaping the very structure of power. If you've ever tried to herd cats, you might have a sense of what Richelieu was up against with the French nobility. These were folks who believed that shared power meant they held it, and the king thanked them for it. Richelieu, however, saw things differently. To him, centralizing authority wasn't just a political move, it was a necessity for keeping France from fracturing like a poorly made crepe. Enter the intendants, Richelieu's not-so-secret weapon in his campaign to bring the provinces to heel. These administrative officials were like the Swiss Army knives of governance, tasked with a little bit of everything: taxes, justice, policing, and even military duties. They were Richelieu's eyes and ears, ensuring the king's edicts didn't just vanish into the ether of noble indifference. By 1635, these intendants were spread across France, wielding power that made local lords squirm. Picture them as the 17th century version of federal agents, knocking on the doors of provincial power brokers and saying, "We'll take it from here. Thanks." The establishment of the intendants was a masterstroke in Richelieu's strategy to centralize power, but it wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms. The nobility saw them as a slap in the face, a not-so-subtle reminder that their feudal privileges were more relic than reality. Richelieu was effectively telling them that the age of the independent lord was over. This move had the subtlety of a sledgehammer, but it was necessary. France was a patchwork of regions that often acted like independent states, and Richelieu knew that to make France strong, he needed to knit those patches into a unified whole. And speaking of sledgehammers, Richelieu had little patience for the noble castles and fortifications that dotted the French landscape like stubborn weeds. These fortresses were more than just defensive structures. They were symbols of noble independence, and Richelieu was determined to see them dismantled. In 1626, he issued an edict that ordered the destruction of all castles that weren't vital to national defence. It was a move that would make any real estate mogul cringe, but it was effective. By reducing the ability of the nobility to wage private wars or resist royal authority, Richelieu was essentially saying, "Playtime's over, kids." Of course, not everyone was thrilled with the Cardinal's iron-fisted approach. His measures against the nobility were about as popular as a wet blanket at a campfire. Many nobles saw him as a usurper, a commoner in clerical robes overstepping his bounds. But for Richelieu it was simple arithmetic. Fewer castles meant less opportunity for rebellion, and more intendants meant more control. The nobility might not have liked it, but they were in no position to argue. Richelieu's network of spies made sure of that, keeping him informed of any whisper of dissent. It's worth noting that Richelieu's policies weren't just about crushing the nobility, they were also about creating a more efficient state. France had been bleeding money like a sieve, and Richelieu's reforms were aimed at plugging the leaks. The intendants weren't just there to boss around the locals, they were also tasked with improving tax collection. Under Richelieu, tax revenues increased significantly, helping to fund both the domestic and international ambitions of the French crown. It was a move that made the state more solvent, even if it meant a few more peasants grumbling about their taxes at the local tavern. Now, let's dispel a myth or two. Richelieu is often painted as a villainous mastermind, but his motivations were more nuanced than simple power lust. Sure, he played hardball, but he had a vision, a strong, centralized France that could hold its own against the Habsburgs and other European powers. His tactics were ruthless, but they were also strategic. He understood that in a world where power was often measured in swords and cannonballs, a divided France was a vulnerable France. And what about the common people, the peasants and townsfolk who lived under the shadow of this political reshuffling? For them, life was a mixed bag. Richelieu's policies brought stability, and with it a degree of prosperity. But they also meant higher taxes and tighter control. The intendants weren't just there to collect taxes, they were also there to enforce royal edicts, sometimes with a heavy hand. It was a classic case of short-term pain for long-term gain, and while the peasants might not have been thrilled, they were at least no longer living in constant fear of noble skirmishers turning their fields into battlefields. Richelieu's centralization efforts also had a profound impact on the cultural landscape. By bringing the nobility to heel, he laid the groundwork for the rise of the French state as a cultural powerhouse. With the court firmly under royal control, it became a centre of art, music, and literature. Richelieu himself was a patron of the arts, founding the Académie Française in 1635 to preserve and promote the French language. It was a move that not only boosted France's cultural prestige, but also ensured that the language of Molière and Voltaire would hold its own against the rising tide of English. Economically, Richelieu's policies helped transform France into a more modern state. His reforms in trade and industry laid the groundwork for future prosperity, even if they sometimes felt like pulling teeth. He promoted the development of a navy, understanding that control of the seas was essential for a nation aspiring to greatness. This wasn't just about flexing military muscle, It was about securing trade routes and expanding France's reach across the globe. Richelieu might have been a man of God, but he understood that earthly power required more than piety. So, where does this leave us in the saga of Richelieu's domestic policies? He was a man of contradictions, both beloved and reviled, respected and feared. His efforts to centralize power set the stage for the absolute monarchy of Louis XIV, the Sun King, who would take Richelieu's vision to its zenith. But that's a story for another day. For now, we see Richelieu not as a villain in a black cloak, but as a figure of historical complexity, a man who understood that sometimes, to build a nation, you have to break a few stones. Stay tuned, because the story of Cardinal Richelieu is far from over, and the ripples of his reign will continue to shape the course of French history long after his passing. And so we arrive at the grand finale of Cardinal Richelieu's saga, a man whose legacy is as much a tangled web as the political intrigues he so deftly managed. In a world where power was often transient and loyalty a mere suggestion, Richelieu carved out a reputation that was both feared and revered. He was a man who managed to centralize power in France without ever wearing a crown, a feat that would give even the most ambitious monarch pause. Let's start with the duality of Richelieu's reputation, a complex dance between ruthless power broker and shrewd statesman. On one hand, he was the puppet master, the man behind the curtain pulling the strings of France's political marionettes. He wielded influence with the precision of a surgeon, cutting away dissent with a flick of his quill. But on the other hand, he was also the architect of a new French state, one that could stand toe-to-toe with the great powers of Europe. His efforts helped transform France from a feudal patchwork into a centralized powerhouse, a nation ready to flex its muscles on the world stage. Richelieu's legacy is often shrouded in myth, a tapestry woven with threads of both truth and fiction. The romantic image of Richelieu as a Machiavellian villain in a black cloak, whispering sinister plans into the ear of King Louis XIII, is as captivating as it is misleading. Yes, he was a master of espionage and intrigue, but his motivations were not born of personal ambition alone. He understood that the survival of the state required sacrifice, and sometimes that meant playing the villain to achieve a greater good. In a way, Richelieu was like a chess player willing to sacrifice his knights to protect the king and ensure France's survival. Economically, Richelieu's policies laid the groundwork for future prosperity. His reforms in trade and industry helped stabilize the French economy, which had been teetering on the brink of collapse. He understood that a strong France needed a strong economy, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that the coffers were filled, even if it meant squeezing the nobility and common folk alike. Under his watch, tax revenues increased significantly, providing the funds necessary to support France's military ambitions and cement its place as a European power. Yet, for all his successes, Richelieu's reign was not without its costs. His centralization efforts often came at the expense of local autonomy, breeding resentment among the nobility and common people alike. The intendants, those provincial overseers, were not universally loved, and their presence was a constant reminder of the crown's reach. Richelieu's policies might have brought stability, but they also sowed the seeds of future discontent, a fact that would come back to haunt his successors. So what can modern diplomats learn from Richelieu's complex strategies? For starters, his ability to balance competing interests and forge unlikely alliances is a lesson in pragmatic diplomacy. He understood that politics is often a game of compromise, where the enemy of your enemy can become your most valuable ally. Richelieu's alliances with Protestant states, despite France's Catholic identity, are a testament to his willingness to prioritize state interests over ideological purity. It's a lesson that remains relevant in today's global landscape, where alliances are often forged out of necessity rather than shared values. Moreover, Richelieu's legacy reminds us of the importance of adaptability. In a world where the political sands are constantly shifting, the ability to adjust strategies and tactics is invaluable. Richelieu's success was not merely due to his cunning, but also his willingness to adapt to changing circumstances, whether it was navigating the treacherous waters of court politics or managing France's involvement in the 30 Years' War. Richelieu's adaptability was key to his enduring influence. Finally, Richelieu's story is a cautionary tale about the costs of power. His relentless pursuit of a centralized state came at a price, both economically and socially. The increased taxes and loss of local autonomy were bitter pills for many to swallow, and while they brought short-term stability, they also laid the groundwork for future unrest. It's a reminder that power, while necessary, must be wielded with care and foresight, lest it become a double-edged sword. As we wrap up this exploration of Richelieu's legacy, it's clear that he was a man of contradictions, a figure who defies easy categorization. He was both a visionary and a pragmatist, a man willing to make hard choices for the sake of his country's future. His legacy is one of strength and strategy, a testament to the power of vision and determination in shaping the destiny of nations. Richelieu's life serves as a reminder that history is not just a series of events, but a complex interplay of people, politics, and power. And in this grand tapestry, Richelieu's thread is one that continues to fascinate, challenge, and inspire. As the sun lazily peeks over the horizon, casting its first beams on the Nile Delta, you find yourself standing on the muddy banks, ready to tackle another day that's as routine as it is vital. It's the 12th century BC, and before you lies a landscape that's not just picturesque, but teeming with life, opportunity, and, let's be honest, more than a few challenges. You're an Egyptian fisherman, and while that might sound like a romantic gig to some, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of what that really means. Spoiler alert, it's not all about leisurely casting nets under the sun-drenched skies. First up, let's talk gear. You'd think fishing in ancient times would be as simple as finding a stick and a string, but no, you've got a kit that would make even the most seasoned angler pause. Nets woven from flax fibers, painstakingly crafted with tight knots so your slippery catch doesn't wriggle away. They come in various sizes, depending on whether you're targeting the nimble tilapia or the more stubborn catfish, both of which are staples in your daily haul. Then there's the harpoon, a tool that requires precision and strength, used primarily when you're in a more aggressive mood or perhaps when the fish are being particularly evasive. Now, before you get too caught up in the romance of it all, let's talk numbers. Because let's face it, if you're not bringing in the fish, you're not bringing in the bread, or should I say, the emmer wheat. The Nile Delta is fertile, sure, but it doesn't exactly hand out free lunches. An average catch can range from 50 to 100 fish a day, depending on the season and how the stars, or rather the river currents, align. This isn't just about feeding your own family, it's about contributing to the wider economy. Fish are bartered and sold, feeding the labourers who build the great monuments, lining the tables of the wealthier households, and even making their way into religious offerings. The Nile itself is a character in your story, both a benevolent provider and a capricious force of nature. Its annual flooding is as predictable as the taxes you owe, and just as crucial. These floods deposit nutrient-rich silt, creating an environment where fish thrive. But they also mean you have to be in tune with the river's rhythms, knowing when and where to cast your nets to avoid coming home empty-handed. But let's not get too swept away by the romance of the river. Fishing in ancient Egypt isn't some idyllic pastime. It's hard work, waking up before dawn to prepare your gear, then spending hours under the sun, muscles straining as you haul in your nets, hoping for a good catch. And don't get me started on the bugs. The Nile might be the lifeblood of Egypt, but it's also home to a swarm of insects that see you as just another meal ticket. The economic significance of your work can't be overstated. The fish you catch are a crucial part of the diet for many Egyptians, providing much-needed protein in a society where meat is a luxury for most. Your catch helps fuel the workforce that constructs the vast temples and monuments that dot the landscape, a clear reminder of Egypt's grandeur and its demanding gods. Speaking of gods, there's a certain spirituality to your work too. The Nile isn't just a river, it's a divine entity. The pharaoh, seen as a living god, relies on the bounty you and others bring from these waters. You might even find yourself whispering a prayer to Hapi, the god of the Nile, asking for a bountiful catch. But while the mythology is rich, the reality is that the river's generosity is as fickle as the weather. As you prepare to launch your small vessel for the day, you can't ignore the social dynamics at play. Fishermen like you are part of a larger community, and while you might not be at the top of the social hierarchy, your role is indispensable. The river is a great equalizer in some ways, yet the distribution of wealth and resources is anything but. You pay your dues, both in labour and in the literal sense, as taxes are levied on your catch. But let's not romanticize this too much. There are no Instagram moments here, no leisurely paddles down the river. Your life is dictated by necessity and survival. The notion of a leisurely fishing trip is a modern luxury, far removed from your daily grind. You're not just fishing for pleasure. You're fishing for survival, for community, for the very fabric of Egyptian society. So, as you step onto your reed boat, the early morning mist clinging to the water's surface, you're not just a fisherman. You're an integral part of an ancient economy, a cog in the machine of a civilization that, thousands of years later, still captivates the imagination. But for now, the only thing on your mind is the river, your nets, and the hope that today's catch will be plentiful. Because in this world, a good day on the Nile can mean the difference between feast and famine. As the morning mist clings to the Nile's surface like a clingy X, you push off from the bank and begin navigating the river's currents. The boat. A humble yet steadfast papyrus vessel is your stage for the day, and the Nile, with its unpredictable temperament, your audience. You may think you're captaining a quaint gondola on a luxurious Venetian canal, but let's not kid ourselves. This is the 12th century BC, and every paddle stroke is an earnest dance with both opportunity and peril. Once you're out on the water, the river reveals its true complexity. It's not just a liquid highway, it's a bustling ecosystem teeming with life. The Nile is your pantry, but it's also your maze. You need to know its moods, its secrets, and its hidden sandbanks that can turn your day into an unexpected swim lesson. The main attraction here is the fish, of course, and the Nile offers a veritable buffet of options. Tilapia, with their tendency to school in large numbers, often make up the bulk of your catch. These guys are the bread and butter, or more appropriately, the emmer wheat and onions, of your operation. Then there's the catfish, those slippery, whiskered devils that like to hide in the river's murky depths. Catching them requires a bit more finesse and a lot more patience, but they're worth it. Not only are they a staple on the dinner tables of the Egyptian lower classes, but they also fetch a decent price at the local market. It's a bit like landing a big client in the world of ancient fishing, high risk, high reward. Speaking of markets, let's talk economics. In your world, fish aren't just food, they're currency. They're bartered, taxed, and traded like stocks on an ancient Egyptian Wall Street. A good haul can mean the difference between paying your taxes on time or facing the wrath of the local tax collector, someone you definitely don't want to cross. Trust me, the ancient Egyptian IRS is as relentless as a crocodile on a hot day. But fishing isn't a solo endeavor. You're part of a broader community, a tight-knit group bound together by the river and the challenges it presents. There's a hierarchy here too, more like a pecking order than a democratic commune. The experienced fishermen, the ones who can read the river's whims like an open scroll, often take on leadership roles. They're the ones who decide when and where to fish, a responsibility that can make or break the day's success. It's a bit like being the captain of a ship, except your ship is a flimsy papyrus boat, and your crew is a bunch of sunburned, bug-bitten fishermen. The social structure of your fishing community is as layered as a Nile mud pie. Youngsters often start as apprentices, learning the ropes from their elders. It's a tough gig, but the promise of expertise, and maybe a few extra fish in your net, is enough to keep them motivated. And let's not forget the women and children, who play crucial roles back on the shore, preparing the catch for market or for the family table. It's an all-hands-on-deck operation, and every pair of hands counts. But let's not sugarcoat it. This life is no picnic. The challenges are as numerous as the fish in the river. The sun is relentless, the mosquitoes are merciless, and the risk of injury is ever present. A slip of the hand with a harpoon or a mishap with a net can mean more than just a bad day. It can mean a costly trip to the healer, whose services are as expensive as they are necessary. Despite the hardships, there's a certain camaraderie among fishermen. Shared struggles breed solidarity, and there's a palpable sense of pride in your work. You're not just catching fish, you're feeding a nation, contributing to an economy that, while ancient, is as complex and interconnected as any modern one. Your efforts help sustain the laborers who build the grand temples and monuments, the very symbols of Egyptian might and divinity. Your vessel glides through the water as the sun climbs higher, and you reflect on the delicate balance you must maintain between man and nature, between survival and prosperity. It's a tough gig, but it's your life, a life that's as deeply intertwined with the Nile as the papyrus reeds along its banks. As the river continues its eternal flow, so too does your journey, one paddle stroke at a time, navigating the currents of both the water and your destiny. As you continue to paddle through the Nile's gentle currents, the sun climbs higher, turning from a gentle companion into something more akin to a relentless overseer. It's midday now, and the reality of this fishing life, often romanticized as tranquil and leisurely, starts to show its true colors. Spoiler alert, it's less about sun-kissed bliss and more about sweat-drenched toil. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to keep this fishing operation afloat. First, your arms, already aching from the morning's exertions, get no respite. Hauling nets laden with a slippery, thrashing bounty is not for the faint-hearted. These nets, made from hand-spun flax, are surprisingly heavy when waterlogged, turning each retrieval into a full-body workout worthy of any modern gym. Forget Pilates, this is the 12th century BC version of CrossFit. And speaking of tools, let's talk about the harpoon. A deceptively simple instrument that's as much a part of your life as the river itself. Archaeological finds reveal that these were crafted with painstaking care, often from wood with a flint tip. While it may look like the ancient equivalent of a sharpened stick, wielding it requires skill, precision, and a hefty dose of courage. One slip, and you're looking at a trip to the local healer, whose services don't come cheap. Let's just say, ancient Egyptian healthcare plans were about as accommodating as a crocodile on a bad day. Now, if the physical demands don't get you, the river itself might. The Nile, as much a provider as it is a predator, hides dangers beneath its placid surface. Crocodiles, those ancient ambush predators, aren't just a bedtime story, but a very real threat. And then there's the river's capricious currents, which can turn from friendly to ferocious in a heartbeat. Myth has it that the river gods protect their own, but in reality, you're on your own against these waterborne hazards. Here's a myth worth busting, the idea that fishing was a peaceful, solitary pursuit. The reality is more akin to a team sport, with all the coordination and unspoken communication that entails. You're part of a crew, and each member has a role, all equally vital in ensuring a successful catch. There's a hierarchy here, dictated by experience and skill. The seasoned veterans call the shots, while the younger, less experienced members are often tasked with the grunt work. It's a bit like an apprenticeship, but with a lot more fish guts involved. And don't get me started on the social dynamics back on shore. The catch isn't just your livelihood, it's currency. Once you dock, the fish are sorted, counted, and prepared for market. Some are salted and dried, a technique that's both art and science, ensuring they last long enough to be traded far and wide. Others are destined for immediate consumption, feeding the labourers who toil under the shadow of monumental projects, like the construction of temples and tombs. Your catch fuels the economy, a fact that's both a point of pride and a constant pressure. Now, let's address the myth of the carefree fisherman basking under the sun. In reality, the Egyptian sun is as much an adversary as any croc. Prolonged exposure is no joke, and without the benefit of SPF 50, you're left to rely on the practical, albeit unfashionable, head coverings made from linen. These serve a dual purpose, shielding you from the sun and the ever-present swarm of insects. Let's just say the Nile's mosquito population isn't shy about making their presence known. Despite the hardships, there's a sense of camaraderie that makes it all worthwhile. The river is both a battleground and a bonding ground, where shared struggles forge friendships as enduring as the Nile itself. You're not just co-workers, you're a community connected by the river's lifeblood and the shared goal of a bountiful catch. So, as midday turns to afternoon, and you continue your laborious dance with the river, remember this: the life of an ancient Egyptian fisherman isn't the tranquil idyll of myth. It's a relentless grind, a test of endurance and skill, where every day is a battle against the elements, and sometimes against the very river that sustains you. But it's your life, one where the line between survival and prosperity is as thin as a fishing net's thread. And with each haul, you're not just catching fish, you're weaving the very fabric of a civilization that, despite its challenges, remains one of history's most enduring legends. As you continue hauling in nets, your thoughts drift to the afternoon's less tangible catch, the cultural and religious significance of your trade. You see, fishing in ancient Egypt wasn't just about sustenance or survival, it was woven into the very fabric of life, much like the intricate hieroglyphs lining temple walls. Fish weren't merely food, they were symbols, characters in the grand narrative of Egyptian mythology and daily life. Let's start with the fish themselves. The Nile's abundant species weren't just a menu, they were a pantheon of symbols. Take the Nile perch, for instance. Not just a meaty prize, but a creature imbued with divine meaning. In hieroglyphics, it represented abundance and fertility, echoing the river's life-giving properties. And let's not forget the catfish, that slippery fellow who, despite its evasive nature, was associated with Hathor, the goddess of love and joy. Yes, even in ancient times, love had its complications. But the true heavyweight champ of ichthyological symbolism was the tilapia. Often depicted in tomb art, this fish represented rebirth and regeneration, presumably due to its habit of carrying its young in its mouth. Picture that, a fish serving as a prehistoric Uber for its offspring, a living metaphor for maternal care. It's no wonder that tilapia were frequently linked to the sun god Ra, who, much like the fish, was a symbol of renewal and the eternal cycle of life. Now, if you think that's interesting, let's wade into the deeper waters of religion. Fishing wasn't just a day job, it was a calling that sometimes veered into the sacred. Imagine this, you're not just casting nets to feed your family, but participating in religious rituals that connect you to the divine. Fish were integral to temple offerings, a gift to the gods to ensure their favor and the continued prosperity of the land. This wasn't just about appeasement, it was a transaction of cosmic significance. You'd think the life of a fisherman was all toil and no glory, but you'd be wrong. Fishermen played roles in ceremonies that were as elaborate as they were essential. During the Opet festival, for example, the sacred bark of Amun was paraded down the Nile, and who do you think ensured its safe passage? That's right, fishermen. The river was your domain, and in these moments you were more than labourers, you were custodians of a divine tradition, guiding the gods themselves through your watery sphere. And here's a juicy tidbit. Art and literature of the time often celebrated the fisherman's life, albeit with a touch of poetic license. In papyrus scrolls and temple carvings, fishermen were depicted with an idealized sheen, casting nets with effortless grace, their boats gliding smoothly through untroubled waters. It's a charming image, though perhaps a bit embellished. The reality was less serene. Picture, more sweat, fewer poetic sunsets. Still, there was a kind of poetry in the hardship. The ancient Egyptians were nothing if not philosophers, and they saw fishing as a metaphor for life itself, unpredictable, demanding, and occasionally rewarding. The Nile was a classroom, its lessons as varied and complex as the fish within it. Speaking of literature, let's not forget the instruction of Tahotep, an ancient text that's the equivalent of a self-help bestseller. It waxes lyrical about the virtues of hard work and patience, qualities every fisherman knows intimately. There's a passage that's particularly apt. Do not be proud because you are learned. Converse with the ignorant as with the wise. A reminder that, in the grand tapestry of Egyptian society, even the humblest fisherman had wisdom to share. By the time the sun dips toward the horizon, casting long shadows on the water, your day has been more than just labor. It's been a tapestry of cultural significance, woven with threads of mythology, religion, and art. As you pull your boat ashore, you're not just returning with a day's catch, but with a renewed sense of your place in this vast and intricate world. In this ancient Egyptian tale, the fisherman's life is far from the idyllic escape some might imagine. It's a life of grit and grace, where every cast of the net is a nod to the myths, the gods, and the art that define your civilization. And though the myths may romanticize your role, the reality is a complex dance between man, nature, and the divine. A dance as eternal as the Nile itself. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting the Nile in a golden glow, you pull your boat ashore, the day's catch a testament to your labor and luck. The village awaits, a collection of mud brick houses and bustling markets that form the nucleus of your world. This return isn't just about unloading fish, it's a reunion with the community that thrives on the river's bounty. The air is thick with anticipation, a mix of earthy aromas and the ever-present buzz of conversation as the evening's activities unfold. Stepping onto solid ground, you're greeted by familiar faces, fellow fishermen, traders, and families who depend on your catch. The village market, a lively patchwork of stalls, is your next stop. Here, fish aren't just commodities, they're lifelines. You barter with traders who haggle with the finesse of seasoned diplomats, each transaction a delicate dance of supply and demand. A tilapia might fetch you a few devons of copper, while a prized catfish could be worth twice as much. It's an economy driven by necessity, not luxury, and every coin counts. But let's not romanticize this exchange. The market is a microcosm of Egyptian society, where the distribution of wealth and power is as uneven as the river's currents. The tax collector, a looming figure with an eye for detail, ensures that the state gets its share. A reminder that even in antiquity, nothing is certain but death and taxes. Your contribution helps fund the grandiose projects that define your civilization, from the towering obelisks to the sprawling temples, each stone a testament to human ambition. Yet, amidst the commerce, there's a sense of camaraderie. The fishermen gather, sharing stories of the day's triumphs and trials, their laughter mingling with the market's vibrant hum. It's a community bound by shared experiences, where the river's challenges forge bonds as strong as any familial ties. Here, the myths of solitary fishermen fade, replaced by the reality of a collective struggle against the elements and the economy. As the evening progresses, the village transforms. Fires crackle to life, casting flickering shadows as families prepare their evening meals. The fish you caught become the centerpiece of a communal feast, a tangible connection to the river's generosity. It's a scene that echoes through time, a reminder that while the methods and markets may change, the essence of community endures. But let's take a step back and consider the broader implications. Fishing in ancient Egypt wasn't just an occupation. It was a vital cog in the machinery of a complex society. Your daily catch fed the laborers who toiled on the pharaoh's monuments, sustained the soldiers who defended the realm, and nourished the priests who communed with the gods. It was an industry that underpinned the economy, a testament to the interconnectedness of human endeavors. And here's where myth meets reality. The romantic notion of the noble fisherman, harmoniously in tune with nature, is a comforting tale. But the truth is far more nuanced. The river, while life-giving, was also unpredictable and unforgiving. Your survival depended not just on skill, but on adaptability, an ability to navigate the capricious whims of both nature and society. It's a lesson as relevant today as it was millennia ago. Adaptability is the key to survival. As the village settles into the rhythm of night, you find a moment to reflect. The river's lessons are etched into your consciousness, a tapestry of experiences that shape your understanding of the world. Fishing isn't just a livelihood, it's a lens through which you view life's complexities, a dance of chance and choice, where every cast of the net is both a gamble and a testament to hope. So, as you lay down to rest, the gentle murmur of the Nile in the background, consider the legacy of your trade. You're part of a lineage that stretches back through the annals of time, a testament to the enduring human spirit. The myths may romanticize your role, but the reality is a complex tapestry woven with threads of hardship and triumph. In this ancient tale, the fisherman isn't just a figure of legend, but a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, we find ways to adapt, connect, and thrive. And there you have it, the life of an ancient Egyptian fisherman, far from idyllic but rich in significance. As you drift into sleep, remember this. The lessons of the past are as relevant today as they were in the days of the pharaohs. In a world that often feels as unpredictable as the Nile, it's the stories of resilience and community that anchor us, offering a timeless reminder that even in the harshest of conditions, there's a beauty in the struggle, a poetry in the perseverance, and a legacy in the lives we lead. Back in the good old days of medieval Europe, before Instagram handles or Twitter bios, if you wanted to flaunt your family crest and make sure everyone knew who you were, you didn't just wear a name tag. You went all out with a coat of arms. Think of it as the 12th century version of a Facebook profile. Only instead of posting selfies and status updates, your biography was plastered on a shield or a banner. This was medieval branding at its finest, folks. Let's dive into this world where knights were the influencers and heraldry was the medieval blue checkmark. The origins of heraldry date back to the chaotic melee of the 11th and 12th centuries, when everyone was running around the battlefield looking like anonymous tin cans. Seriously, imagine the confusion. You're charging into battle, and everyone is wearing the same shiny metal outfit. It's like showing up to a party where everyone has the same costume on. A knight needed something to distinguish friend from foe, and thus heraldry was born. These coats of arms weren't just decorative. They were the medieval solution to a high-stakes game of who's who on the battlefield. Imagine trying to call out to your buddy in a sea of identical helmets and armor. "Hey, you! Yeah, you with the sword." Not exactly the most efficient way to rally the troops. Instead, knights began to emblazon their shields and surcoats with unique symbols, colors, and patterns. This way, they could recognize each other at a glance, saving valuable time and, possibly their lives. Heraldry was an art and science all its own. It wasn't just about slapping a cool design on a shield. There were rules. Oh, were there rules? You'd think the medieval folks had invented bureaucracy. Colors, known as tinctures, followed a strict code. Metals like gold, ore, and silver argent were paired with colors like red gules, blue azure, green vert, and black sable. If you mixed them up, you'd be committing a fashion faux pas of epic proportions. Picture showing up to a royal tournament with your coat of arms all wrong, the medieval equivalent of wearing socks with sandals. But the symbols themselves? They had to mean something. Lions, eagles, and dragons were all the rage. The lion, king of the beasts, was the go-to for the bravest of knights. It shouted, "I'm brave, I'm strong, and I might just bite your head off." Eagles were for those who fancied themselves a bit more majestic and high-flying, literally and metaphorically. Dragons, meanwhile, suggested a certain flair for the dramatic. "Yes, I am terrifying. Yes, I am awesome. No, you cannot touch my treasure." The practical side of heraldry extended beyond the battlefield. In 1127, Geoffrey Plantagenet, Count of Anjou, was sporting a blue shield with golden lions. This wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a statement of identity and a claim to power. When you saw those lions, you knew who you were dealing with. Royalty, legacy, and a hefty dose of medieval swagger. And let's not forget the heralds themselves, the original brand managers and PR agents. They were the ones who kept track of all these symbols and ensured no one was accidentally, or, heaven forbid, intentionally using someone else's crest. Imagine the scandal if two knights showed up to a tournament with the same coat of arms. The horror. These heralds were also responsible for making sure the right message was being sent. A poorly designed coat of arms could lead to more than just embarrassment. It could mean a diplomatic disaster. If you were a noble, you wanted to make sure that every lion, every stripe, every color shouted your family's history and status. It was a delicate balance of artistry, symbolism, and practicality, with a dash of medieval politics thrown in for good measure. Interestingly, the earliest documented coats of arms didn't belong to knights, but to ecclesiastical figures. Think bishops and abbots who needed to mark their property or seal documents with a bit of flair. By the 13th century, everyone who was anyone had a coat of arms. The system became so elaborate that even tournaments had their own set of heraldry rules, like the medieval NCAA. One of the most intriguing aspects of heraldry was its ability to convey messages without uttering a single word. It was visual shorthand for alliances, enmities, and aspirations. Marriages were often sealed with the merging of two coats of arms, creating complex designs that told a family story. Picture a couple's wedding registry, but with shields and lions instead of toasters and dinnerware. Now, for a bit of myth-busting, despite what romantic tales might suggest, not every knight in shining armor was a chivalrous hero, and not every coat of arms was a noble family's proud emblem. Some folks simply bought their way into heraldry. That's right, there were medieval social climbers too. If you had enough coin, you could commission a coat of arms and leapfrog your way into the upper echelons of society. Who needs a noble lineage when you have a well-designed shield and a bag of gold? The coat of arms was more than just a fancy adornment, it was a necessity. In the chaos and clamour of medieval warfare, it was crucial to identify friend from foe. A knight's life could depend on it. As battles raged and history unfolded, these symbols served as enduring markers of identity and legacy woven into the very fabric of medieval society. So, there you have it, the origins of heraldry. A medieval social media profile that was as much about survival as it was about style. From the battlefields of Europe to the halls of power, these symbols tell a story of a world where visual identity was everything. Next time you see a coat of arms, remember that it's more than just a pretty design. It's a snapshot of history, captured in colour and symbol. Now let's roll up our sleeves and dive headfirst into the riotous kaleidoscope that is heraldic symbols. Welcome to a world where lions and eagles were the medieval equivalent of driving a Ferrari, while hedgehogs and snails were left languishing in the clearance aisle of the heraldic dollar store. But why, you ask, did medieval folks have such a penchant for turning the animal kingdom into a symbolic status game? In medieval Europe, the lion wasn't just the king of beasts, it was the king of branding. Slap a lion on your shield, and you were shouting to the world that you were not just brave, but possibly the bravest, the fiercest, and, as any lion worth its mane would agree, the one most likely to bite first and ask questions later. The English monarchy, no strangers to flexing their regal muscles, draped their shields with lions in all manner of poses, passant, rampant, or, as I like to think, showing off their best side for the medieval paparazzi. Eagles, meanwhile, were the go-to choice for those who fancied themselves majestic overlords of the skies. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of saying, "I have my eye on you," from about 10,000 feet up. The Holy Roman Empire, never known for subtlety, adopted the double-headed eagle. Why one head when you can have two, right? Twice the majesty, twice the intimidation, and none of the indecision. But while the lion and the eagle were busy strutting their stuff on the medieval catwalk, you might wonder where the snail fits into all this. Quite frankly, it didn't. Snails and hedgehogs were for those who were perhaps more, shall we say, understated. Just imagine a knight charging into battle with a snail on his shield. The message? I might not be fast, but I'm determined. Also, I have a house on my back. The rules of heraldry were as strict as a medieval nun with a ruler. This was an era where even the chaos of battle couldn't escape the clutches of bureaucracy. Heraldic authorities were the gatekeepers of this colourful chaos, ensuring that no two knights would show up to a tournament with identical shields. Talk about medieval crowd control. These heraldic laws were so detailed they could make a modern-day lawyer weep with envy or frustration. Take the rule of tincture, for example. It was the ironclad law that dictated colours and metals could never touch. Imagine the horror of a gold lion on a silver shield, an abomination that would have sent heralds running for the hills. This rule wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a matter of practicality. In the heat of battle, you needed to spot your allies at a glance, and a poorly designed coat of arms could spell disaster faster than you could say crossbow. Despite all this regulation, heraldry was not immune to the whims of human ambition and vanity. As with any status symbol, there were those who bent the rules or outright bought their way in. If you had the coin, you could commission a coat of arms that screamed nobility, even if your actual pedigree was a bit more dubious. It's the medieval equivalent of buying followers on Instagram. Who needs a noble ancestor when you've got a shiny new crest and a pocket full of gold? Economically, heraldry was a booming business. Artists, known as heraldic painters, made a tidy sum creating these emblems. A single shield could cost a knight the equivalent of a year's wages for a peasant. But hey, in a world where your family's prestige was measured in lions and stripes, no expense was too great. And let's not forget the heralds themselves, the unsung heroes of this medieval pageantry. Part event planners, part record keepers, they were the ones who made sure everything ran smoothly. These were the folks who ensured that every tournament, every joust, every battlefield was a coordinated display of martial prowess and sartorial splendor. Their role was so crucial that a poorly managed tournament could lead to actual war. Imagine the logistics nightmare of coordinating hundreds of knights, each with their own coat of arms and each with their own ego. It wasn't all battles and tournaments, though. Heraldry also played a role in the more mundane aspects of medieval life. Seals on documents bore heraldic symbols, making them the medieval equivalent of a signature. Nobles couldn't just scribble their name at the bottom of a decree. They impressed their coat of arms, a literal stamp of authority and authenticity. And while we're on the subject of authenticity, it's worth noting that not all heraldic symbols were as straightforward as they seemed. Dragons, for instance, weren't just for those with a flair for the dramatic. They were also a nod to ancient myths and legends, a way to connect oneself to the grand tales of yore. It was a way of saying, yes, I am part of something larger, something mythical. Heraldry was a language all its own, a visual shorthand that conveyed messages without a single word. It was the medieval emoji, a way to express identity, allegiance, and aspiration in a world where literacy was a privilege of the few. Coats of arms were stories told in colour and symbol, a tapestry of history that, like any good story, was as much about the teller as it was about the tale itself. So, the next time you see a coat of arms, think of it not just as a relic of a bygone era, but as a snapshot of a time when visual identity was everything. From the battlefield to the banquet hall, these symbols were the calling cards of a society that valued lineage and legacy above all else. And in a world where who you were was often defined by what you bore on your shield, heraldry was more than just a decorative art. It was a declaration of self, a medieval manifesto in metal and paint. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the intricate and colourful tapestry of heraldry in our next chapter. As we peel back the layers of medieval heraldry, we're not just looking at pretty pictures on shields, we're diving into a cauldron of social ambition and economic one-upmanship. In a world where status was as visible as the coat of arms you bore, it wasn't enough to have a snazzy design. You had to keep up with the Joneses, or the Plantagenets in this case. Maintaining these symbols of identity wasn't just a matter of artistic pride, it was an economic endeavour that could drain the coffers faster than a knight could draw his sword. Picture this. A single well-crafted shield could set a knight back by an amount equivalent to a peasant's annual income. We're talking anywhere from 20 to 40 shillings, easy. That's the kind of cash that could buy you a small herd of sheep or a decent chunk of farmland. But in the world of chivalry and tournaments, a plain old shield just wouldn't cut it. You needed something that screamed, "I belong." And that, my friends, came with a hefty price tag. The cost of heraldry was more than just the initial outlay for a shield or a banner. Consider the upkeep. These emblems needed to be vibrant, recognizable, and, above all, impressive. If your colours faded in the sun or your lion's mane started looking more like a bedraggled housecat, you risked a serious blow to your reputation. Repainting and repairing were part of the deal, and that meant keeping a heraldic painter or two on retainer. It's like having a personal stylist for your armour, because even in the 12th century, fashion was fleeting. Now, let's talk about the heraldic arms race, a medieval equivalent of keeping up with the Kardashians, but with more chainmail and fewer selfies. As more families adopted coats of arms, the designs became increasingly elaborate. Simple lions and eagles gave way to intricate patterns and complex colour schemes. To stand out in this crowded field, nobles began adding embellishments like crests, supporters, and mottos. These additions not only increased the cost, but also the complexity of the designs. A simple shield could evolve into a work of art, and the more detailed the design, the more impressive the bearer appeared. This arms race wasn't just about vanity. It was a strategic move in the social chess game that was medieval nobility. A more ornate coat of arms could signal alliances, wealth, and influence, opening doors that might otherwise remain firmly shut. In a society where bloodlines and connections were currency, heraldry was a way to showcase not just who you were, but whom you knew. But what if you were a social climber with lofty ambitions and a less-than-stellar pedigree? Never fear, heraldry had a loophole for that too. If your pockets were deep enough, you could buy your way into the ranks of the heraldically blessed. Commissioning a coat of arms was perfectly legal, if not entirely noble. And in a world where appearances mattered, a new crest could be your ticket to the top. This phenomenon wasn't without its critics. Some purists saw the proliferation of heraldry as a dilution of its noble origins, but practicality often outweighed principle. Knights and nobles were pragmatic folks, and if a new crest could secure a marriage alliance or a political favour, well, who were they to argue with success? And let's not forget the heralds in this swirling mix of ambition and artistry. These were the folks who kept meticulous records of all these burgeoning coats of arms, ensuring that no two knights would show up at a joust with the same design. Imagine the scandal. It was like turning up to the Oscars in the same gown as your rival. Heralds were the gatekeepers of this vibrant world, armed with scrolls and ink instead of swords and shields. Their role was crucial, not just in maintaining order, but in preserving the integrity of heraldry as a symbol of identity. Beyond the battlefield and the tournament grounds, heraldry had a more practical application in everyday life. Seals on documents bore these symbols, providing a visual guarantee of authenticity. It was a time when a signature alone wasn't enough. You needed that extra stamp of approval, literally. This practice extended to property markings, where a family's crest denoted ownership and authority. It was as much about control as it was about communication, a silent assertion of power in a world where might still made right. As we wander through this colourful world of shields and banners, it's easy to romanticize the past. But let's not forget the harsh realities that lay beneath the surface. Heraldry was a reflection of a society deeply divided by class and wealth. For every noble flaunting their lion-adorned shield, there was a peasant toiling in the fields, oblivious to the pageantry playing out in the courts and castles. The allure of heraldry lay in its ability to transcend these divides, to offer a glimmer of hope for those who dared to dream of something greater. It was a visual language that spoke of ambition and aspiration, of a world where who you were was less important than who you could become. It was a world where the right design could change your fortunes, where a well-placed lion or eagle could open doors that were otherwise closed. In this medieval Game of Thrones, heraldry was the currency of the realm. And as we continue to explore this fascinating world, let's keep in mind the countless stories that these symbols tell. They are tales of courage and cunning, of art and ambition, of a time when a coat of arms was more than just decoration, it was a declaration of self. Join me as we venture further into this tapestry of history, unravelling the threads of heraldry in our quest to understand the world it once defined. Heraldry wasn't just a medieval fashion statement, it was the glue that held the feudal system together. Imagine a world where a misstep in design could lead to a battlefield brawl or a diplomatic disaster. In the high-stakes game of medieval politics, your coat of arms was more than just a pretty picture. It was a loaded symbol, a visual manifesto flaunting your allegiance and intentions to the world. Take the 100 Years' War, for instance. This wasn't just a squabble between England and France over who got to wear the crown, it was a heraldic showdown of epic proportions. You had the English kings sporting their quartered lions and lilies, a not-so-subtle claim on the French throne, as if to say, "This land is my land, and these fleurs-de-lis prove it." Meanwhile, the French were busy rallying under their own noble symbols, each side flaunting their crests like medieval gang colours. It was a visual war of attrition, where each emblem was a stake in the ground, a declaration of "game on." But the battlefield wasn't the only place where heraldry flexed its muscles. Picture this, a grand medieval banquet, tables groaning under the weight of roasted boar and goblets of wine. Amidst the revelry, a visiting noble unfurls a banner emblazoned with a crest that looks suspiciously like the host's. Cue the awkward silence, the sideways glances, and the whispered accusations of crest stealing, a faux pas that could escalate from a diplomatic hiccup to an outright feud faster than you could say pass the mead. Indeed, having the wrong crest at the wrong time could land you in hot water. Just ask Sir Richard Scrope and Sir Robert Grosvenor. In the late 14th century, these two noblemen found themselves embroiled in a legal battle over who had the right to bear a specific coat of arms. The case dragged on for years, involving hundreds of witnesses and laying bare the tangled web of medieval loyalties. The verdict? Scrope kept the arms, but not without leaving a trail of animosity and empty purses in his wake, a cautionary tale of the pitfalls of heraldic doppelgangers. Heraldry also played a starring role in the art of medieval diplomacy. Treaties were often sealed with the exchange of heraldic tokens, a kind of medieval handshake immortalized in metal and paint. When Richard the Lionheart and Saladin brokered a truce during the Third Crusade, their agreement was symbolized by the exchange of heraldic gifts, a visual testament to their uneasy peace. It was a delicate dance of power and compromise, where a well-chosen emblem could convey more than 1,000 words ever could. But let's not get too swept away by the romance of it all. Beneath the chivalric veneer lay a gritty reality, where honour was often a convenient mask for ambition. The knightly ideal of chivalry, brave, noble, and selfless, was as much a PR campaign as it was a code of conduct. Knights weren't just warriors. They were the medieval equivalent of rock stars, complete with entourages, fan clubs, and the occasional scandal. Sure, they pledged to protect the weak and uphold justice, but let's not kid ourselves. Many were in it for the land, the loot, and the glory. Take the infamous William Marshal, hailed as the greatest knight of the age. He served 4 English kings, fought at countless tournaments, and even helped to draft the Magna Carta. But beneath the shiny armor and legendary reputation, he was as much a savvy politician as a chivalric hero. Marshall knew how to play the game, leveraging his prowess and loyalty to secure lands, titles, and influence. His life was a testament to the fact that in the brutal world of medieval power, sometimes the pen and the sword were mightier than the ideal. In truth, the line between chivalry and ambition was as blurred as a medieval manuscript after a spilled goblet of wine. Knights swore oaths of fealty, but those oaths were often as flexible as a well-worn chainmail hauberk. Loyalty shifted with the winds of fortune, and the same knight who pledged to defend his lord's honour could just as easily turn coat if the price was right. Honour and pragmatism danced a delicate waltz, and woe betide the knight who misstepped. As we continue to peel back the layers of medieval heraldry, it's clear that these symbols were more than just decorations. They were the threads that wove together the tapestry of feudal life. They told stories of power and prestige, of alliances forged and broken, of battles won and lost. And while the knights who bore them may have been flawed, their crests remain as enduring testaments to a world where identity was everything and a well-chosen symbol could change the course of history. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's plenty more to uncover in the next chapter of our heraldic saga. We've only just scratched the surface of this colourful world, where lions and eagles jostled for supremacy and snails made a surprisingly determined bid for the spotlight. So, stay tuned as we delve deeper into the history of heraldry, uncovering the secrets and stories that lie hidden behind each shield and banner. Because in the grand game of medieval life, every crest had a tale to tell, and we're just getting started. So, as we unravel the colourful tapestry of medieval heraldry, it's time to fast forward a few centuries and see how these ancient symbols have crash-landed into our modern world. Spoiler alert, they've traded chainmail for corporate suits and battlefields for boardrooms, yet their allure remains as magnetic as ever. Who knew that a system devised so knights wouldn't accidentally clobber each other would evolve into the sophisticated world of branding we recognise today? First, let's talk about coats of arms. They're not just for medieval nobles or fantasy RPG avatars. They're alive and kicking in the modern world. Take the British royal family, for instance. The Queen's coat of arms is a dazzling display of lions, unicorns, and a hefty dose of tradition, whispering, "We ruled half the world once, and we're still not over it." But it's not just the Windsors who get to play this game. Many families, especially in Europe, still boast their own coats of arms, a nod to their ancestral roots, and a not-so-subtle hint at bygone glory. And then there's the institutional side of things. Universities, cities, and even some corporations have embraced heraldic designs. Ever seen the University of Oxford's crest? Those 3 crowns and an open book aren't just for show. They're a visual resume shouting centuries of academic prowess. It's like a LinkedIn profile, but with more Latin and less humble bragging. Companies too, especially those with a penchant for legacy, often incorporate heraldic elements into their logos. Think of it as a corporate tattoo, signifying heritage and authority in a world obsessed with newness. But the real democratization of heraldry? Sports teams. That's right. From the NFL to the Premier League, teams are strutting their stuff with logos that scream medieval bravado. Lions, eagles, and bears. Oh my. Each team logo is a modern coat of arms, designed to strike fear into the hearts of opponents and rally fans like medieval peasants cheering for their local knight. Take the Detroit Lions or the Philadelphia Eagles. Those mascots are more than just marketing tools. They're modern-day battle cries, invoking the same primal loyalty and identity that medieval knights sought on the battlefield. The evolution from battlefield emblems to sports logos tells us something profound about human nature. We're hardwired for symbols. They're shorthand for identity, belonging, and a touch of tribalism. In medieval times, your coat of arms was your ticket to recognition and respect. Today, wearing your team's colours or displaying a family crest serves a similar purpose. It's about belonging to something bigger than yourself, whether it's a feudal lord's retinue or a fan base that bleeds team colours. But let's not get too misty-eyed. There's a practical side to this too. In the cutthroat world of branding, a well-crafted logo can make or break a company. It's the difference between being Apple and, well, a fruit stand. The persistence of heraldic elements in modern branding underscores a vital point. In a world drowning in digital noise, a strong visual identity is worth its weight in gold, or gules if we're sticking with medieval parlance. Now let's have a reality check. While heraldry might seem romantic visions of knights in shining armor and family legacies etched in stone, the truth is, it's also a testament to humanity's relentless quest for status and recognition. The medieval herald was essentially an early brand strategist, ensuring that a noble's crest carried the right message, just as today's marketing teams agonize over font choices and color palettes. It's a reminder that, whether in the 12th century or the 21st, humans have always been obsessed with how they're perceived. And what about the economics of all this? Back in the day, commissioning a coat of arms was a serious financial commitment, akin to buying a sports car today. These days, the costs have shifted from gold leaf and painter fees to graphic designers and marketing consultants. Yet the underlying principle remains startlingly similar. Invest in your image, and the returns could be substantial. As we wrap up this journey through the heraldic halls of history, one thing becomes clear. The symbols that once rallied knights to battle now inspire everything from brand loyalty to familial pride. They're a testament to our enduring need to belong, to identify, and to stand out in a world that never seems to stop spinning. Whether it's a medieval banner flapping in the wind or a logo on a sports jersey, these emblems speak to something deeply human, a desire for continuity in a constantly changing world. So, next time you see a lion adorning a football helmet or a crest on a university seal, remember, you're glimpsing a legacy that's been centuries in the making. It's a visual language that connects us to the past, even as it propels us into the future. And in this grand, ongoing narrative of human history, heraldry is the footnote that refuses to be forgotten, a vibrant reminder that symbols, like the stories they tell, are as powerful as ever.